Chapter 19. Zhao Ying clenched her teeth and tried her best to hold on, but she was getting more and more desperate. Blades were coming at her from all directions, and they could kill her at any time. Senior brother Chu was here as well. Were they going to die here? She tried hard to clear her mind of distracting thoughts and focused on her swordsmanship. She looked for an opening to attack and held on for as long as she could. "Senior martial brother, you go first," she shouted. Chu Li sighed and unsheathed his sword. He pressed on the saddle and leaped into the air. He dove down like an eagle, his sword flashing like lightning. Ah! Screams of agony could be heard one after another. Zhao Ying felt the pressure on her suddenly lessen. She quickly turned her head to look. Chu Li's body was like a ghost, and his sword was like lightning. Every time he flashed, someone would fall. In the blink of an eye, before she could even use her third move, everyone had already fallen to the ground. Other than the two of them, no one else was left standing. "Senior brother," Zhao Ying was surprised. Chu Li leaned on his sword, his face turning pale. He smiled bitterly and said, "Let's go. We shouldn't stay here for long." "All right." Zhao Ying nodded. This time, she did not need Chu Li's reminder. She raised her sword and stabbed the people on the ground one by one. Then, she helped Chu Li onto the horse. The two of them galloped away and finally left the territory of the Raging Tiger Ridge. Once they left the Raging Tiger Ridge, Zhao Ying let out a long sigh of relief and turned to look at Chu Li. Chu Li's complexion did not improve. He was still as pale as a sheet. "Brother Chu, let's find a place to rest. Now that we've left the ferocious Tiger Mountain, there won't be any more robberies. Let's go further. Be careful, they might catch up. Can you hold on?" "No problem." Chu Li smiled. "I'm fine. I'm just tired from channeling too much." Zhao Ying shook her head. Even if he was tired, he couldn't be this tired. He must have been injured. He must have activated a secret technique that stimulated his potential, and the after effects were acting up. Especially just now, he must have used a secret technique for the second time, which worsened his injuries. Thinking of this, she blamed herself. She was too useless. Her martial arts were too weak. Not only could she not fulfill her duty as a guard, but she was also a burden. This was simply a disgrace. Chu Li smiled. "Junior sister Zhao, don't blame yourself. The strength of your martial arts is not up to you. Just focus on cultivating." "Yes." Zhao Ying lowered her head. Chu Li said, "You haven't fully understood the profoundness of the swallow sword technique. It's best if you observe swallows or see how other birds fly. I'm sure you'll be inspired." "That's right." Zhao Ying raised her head and revealed an excited expression. "I should observe the flying swallow." Chu Li smiled. "There will be a chance." As the two of them talked, they ran for another dozen li and finally rested in a forest. It was already evening. Zhao Ying jumped onto a tree and looked around. She shook her head. "Senior brother Chu, we may have to sleep in the wild tonight. I'm not that delicate." Chu Li smiled. He sat cross-legged on a thick layer of withered leaves. An endless stream of inner energy surged into his body from the ground, nourishing his body. His meridians were like dry land that had received rain, recovering rapidly. After his meridians recovered a little, he circulated the minute pulse cleansing technique to speed up his recovery. Zhao Ying looked at Chu Li's expression. Chu Li smiled. "I'm really fine. I'll be fine after some rest. It's all my fault." Zhao Ying whispered. Chu Li said, "Junior sister Zhao, you're asking for trouble if you think that way. I can only blame myself for not being skilled enough." Zhao Ying shook her head. Chu Li smiled. "Junior sister Zhao, do you know how to cook?" "Of course." "Then let's make a delicious meal." "Okay." Zhao Ying nodded vigorously. "Only when you're full will you have the strength to heal." She turned around to gather some wild vegetables and mushrooms. She was very proficient with mushrooms. Most of the mushrooms in the wild were inedible. One careless mistake and one would be poisoned. However, most of the mushrooms in the wild were delicious. In the end, she used jerky and rice, along with the wild vegetables and mushrooms, to cook a pot of porridge. After cooking for 4 hours, the aroma filled his nostrils. After Chu Li drank it, his whole body was steaming hot. It was indescribably comfortable. Her porridge was cooked to perfection. It was especially delicious when he was so tired. The moonlight was like water. Chu Li sat quietly and cultivated. Zhao Ying sat 3 steps away from him. She listened to his long and deep breathing. She suddenly felt at ease. She stole a glance at Chu Li. Chu Li's face was solemn. It was as if he was one with heaven and earth. He exuded an inexplicable majesty and momentum. She quickly closed her eyes, afraid of being discovered by Chu Li. Thinking of the humiliation during the day, she suddenly became energetic. She had to cultivate desperately. Under the circulation of her inner energy, her meridians stabilized. She completed one cycle after another. Usually, she could only complete 10 cycles. Now, she had completed 20 cycles. In this way, it was no different than doubling her cultivation speed. How amazing was this? She also felt that her meridians were stabilized during the day. However, she did not expect it to be this amazing. The effects of the medicine had only been completely exhausted now. She glanced at Chu Li again and lay down to sleep. When she woke up in the morning, she turned around and did not see Chu Li. She quickly jumped onto a tree. The 2 horses were still there, but Chu Li was nowhere to be seen. She was about to call for him when footsteps were heard. Chu Li walked out from the depths of the forest with 2 deer. "Brother Chu," she quickly called out. Chu Li lifted the 2 deer and smiled. "I'm in luck. You should have told me." Zhao Ying landed in front of him. She rolled her eyes at him and took the deer. "Are your injuries better?" Chu Li smiled. "I'm fine now." Zhao Ying smiled. "That's good. What do you want to eat?" "Sister's specialty." Chu Li smiled. Zhao Ying had small and exquisite pots and bowls on the saddle. This was a necessary equipment for a protector. It was very risky for a protector to eat other people's food when they were outside. Even if they had silverware to test for poison, it was not safe. It was best to eat their own food. "Watch me." Zhao Ying smiled. The 2 of them ate a meal of boiled deer meat. The aroma of the meat and the mushroom mixed together to form a rich, unique aroma that made people salivate. The 2 of them continued their journey after the meal. The rest of the journey was smooth. There were no more robberies. In the evening, they arrived in front of a valley. This valley was very hidden. It looked like a depression next to a small hill. After entering, they realized that it was a different world. The valley was deep and dense with lush vegetation. The land was fertile. Chu Li was amazed. As expected of the House of High Dukes, they were so powerful that they could find such a wonderful and inconspicuous place here. "This is the place?" Zhao Ying followed them into the valley. She looked at the dense trees and said helplessly, "No one has been here before, right?" Chu Li nodded. "That's why it's so hidden. From today onwards, we can't leave the valley. How long do we have to stay?" "A month." "What can we do in a month?" "Planting deity's beard." "You don't know about this thing, right?" Zhao Ying shook her head. She had never heard of it. Chu Li smiled and explained about the deity's beard. He then began to work. The 3 long knives were put to use. They cut down the trees like tofu. Chu Li and Zhao Ying cut down a few trees and built 2 wooden houses. It was simple but sturdy. Deep in the valley, there was a pool under the stone wall. It was as clear as a mirror. They fetched water from there. Zhao Ying was usually responsible for cooking and training. Chu Li cleared 5 acres of land to plant deity's beard and nightmare flower. He found 4 stalks of tendon refinement grass in the valley. He combined them with the earth dragon grass and made 16 tendon refinement pills. The 2 of them divided them in half. The tendon refinement pill was precious to others, but it was easy for him to get. Zhao Ying did not argue and happily accepted it. After taking it, she realized that her meridians had doubled. She could train from night to morning. Her inner energy had improved by leaps and bounds. Chu Li's speed was even faster. In 10 days, she had already broken through 30 acupuncture points. 6 more acupuncture points, and she would be able to complete the acquired stage. For a protector, if her martial arts did not hinder her, she would be able to break through rank 7 and become a rank 7 protector. Unfortunately, there was a huge gap between the acquired stage and the innate stage. It was extremely difficult to break through the innate stage. Out of 10 people who practiced martial arts, 9 were blocked. It was like a carp leaping through the dragon's gate. The key to breaking through the innate stage was still the cultivation level. If the foundation was solid and the talent was good, it would be easy to break through. If the foundation was not solid and the talent was poor, it would be forever stuck. Early in the morning, Zhaoying woke up and went out to wash up. She then began to practice the swallow blade. She recalled Chu Li's pointers from the day before and studied it repeatedly. Little by little, she corrected it. She only changed 2 minor parts, but the power of the swallow blade had increased a lot. Chu Li's eyes were like lightning. He could always find the weakness of the blade technique. In just 10 days, Zhaoying felt that her blade technique had changed drastically. Her power was not the same as before. After she finished her practice, she came to Chu Li's hut. Chu Li was practicing the delusion split. His movements were slow and leisurely, as if he was blindly gesticulating. She shook her head. Zhuo Feiyang did not practice this sword technique this way. He practiced it as fast as he could. He said that in order to break the opponent's sword, the sword must be faster. Otherwise, if the weakness was found, the sword would not be fast enough. The opportunity would be fleeting, and it would be useless. Now, she trusted Chu Li even more. Zhuo Feiyang was like a child, and his knowledge of martial arts was far from hers. There must be a reason why Chu Li was practicing so slowly. It was not a waste of time. Brother, oh, take the flower on the table and eat it. What flower? I planted it for fun. It tastes good. You're not joking with me, are you? Zhao Ying stared at him. She realized that Chu Li loved to tease others. He loved to tease her. Sometimes, she did not know whether to laugh or cry. She wanted to lose her temper, but she could not. Chu Li laughed as he practiced. It's good stuff. Don't regret it if you don't eat it. If there's anything wrong with it, I'll make you pay. Zhao Ying scoffed. She walked to the square wooden table and opened the wooden box on the table. Inside was a crystal-clear flower. It was like an ice sculpture. It was so beautiful that she could not bear to eat it. How do I eat it? Just pluck the petals and eat it. It tastes good. Zhao Ying looked at him worriedly. She steeled her heart and plucked one of the petals and placed it in her mouth. The sweet and refreshing taste flowed down her throat and into her heart. It was an indescribable comfort. She plucked another petal. When she came to her senses, the flower was already gone. She looked at Chu Li embarrassedly. Chu Li smiled. This is the nightmare flower. It's good for women. What's its use? Zhao Ying asked curiously. She did not feel uncomfortable. Instead, she felt warm and comfortable. Chapter 20. Zhao Ying's eyes widened. Eternal youth? Bullsh asterisk T. Chu Li smiled. It's the seed that the third lady got. It can't be wrong. How do you feel? Such a precious thing. Zhao Ying hesitated and felt uneasy. She glared at Chu Li. You're too despicable. Chu Li's words reminded her of something. No matter how uneducated she was, she had heard of the legend of the nightmare flower. When the female protectors gathered together to chat, they would talk about the nightmare flower. They all dreamt of meeting such a rare flower. It would be wonderful. They all knew that it was a dream that could never come true. The nightmare flower was almost extinct. Even if there was one, it would not be theirs. She did not expect to eat the nightmare flower today. She was just a small protector. How could she have the right to eat it? Chu Li sheathed his sword and walked in front of her. Why? Do you think you're not worthy? Of course. Zhao Ying nodded. She knew her place. Her looks were passable, but there were many beauties in the world. There were many in the public house. Moreover, her beauty was not the best and could not compare to the women in the public house. To a protector, talent was the most important. Martial arts was the fundamental value. If her martial arts was weak, she would be the lowest ranking protector. It would not change because of her beauty. Chu Li shook his head and laughed. You're worthy. Zhao Ying rolled her eyes. Why do you have the nightmare flower? I planted it for the lady. That's reasonable, right? It's very troublesome to abuse your position. The third lady is fair and will not forgive you. The public house had strict rules. Once violated, the punishment would be severe. She did not want Chu Li to be punished because of this. Don't worry, the lady gave me one. Really? Zhao Ying sighed in relief. Don't think too much. The nightmare flower can also increase your martial arts. Hurry up and cultivate. All right. Zhao Ying bit her lip and turned to leave. She felt pressured. Chu Li had given her too much, but she could not repay him. She understood Chu Li's feelings, but feelings were not something else. She could not force herself. She liked Chu Li, but it was not to the point where she would do anything for him. She just liked to stay by his side. She did not have the strong impulse of a moth flying into a flame. Chu Li looked at her graceful silhouette and shook his head. He had been too hasty. He had to let it go and slow down. If he pushed her too hard, it would be bad. Time flew by like a white steed passing through a crevice, and a month quickly passed by. Chu Li's cultivation was progressing rapidly. 36 acupuncture points had been completely opened, and he had perfected his acquired mastery. When the conditions were right, he had reached the innate mastery's boundary. Now, his inner energy could be transferred through objects. He quickly figured out the reason. It was because of the life and death scripture. Originally, he could communicate with flowers and plants with spiritual qi, which was similar to the release of inner energy. It was already an innate ability, but it could only be used with flowers and plants. After breaking through the 36 acupoints, it spread to the entire world. In the Khanate realm, the life and death scripture was even more powerful. Not only did it expand to 200 meters, but he also didn't need to step on the ground to connect with plants. More importantly, he could now transfer the spiritual energy of plants to others. This meant that within a range of 200 meters, he could attack anyone with his inner force. It was impossible to defend against it. If he could level up the Life and Death Sutra once more, he would be able to control it from a further distance to 1,000 meters. If that were the case, he would truly be a heaven-defying existence. If he were to suddenly use it while others were cultivating, it would be enough to cause them to go berserk. As he thought of this, his heart burned with passion. What a great life and death scripture. The innate mastery's boundary allowed his spiritual energy to skyrocket. His omniscient mirror covered a radius of 3 miles. Within 3 miles, he could see through everything. Zhao Ying had also improved by leaps and bounds in this month. She had broken through 30 acupuncture points and was steadily at rank 8. She was even confident that she could reach rank 7. She felt that in another half a month, she would have perfected her acquired mastery. This was partly due to the tendon cleansing grass and the nightmare flowers effect. It increased her inner force and strengthened her meridians. She felt that she was now twice as talented as Zhuo Feiyang. She would definitely become an innate master. One morning, Chu Li took a knife and harvested all the deity's beard. The deity's beard looked like grass, but it was thinner and longer. It felt more pliable to the touch. If one looked closely, one could see that it was different. However, who would pay attention to grass? Sister, our mission is over. Chu Li and Zhao Ying put the grass into a sack and smiled. We can go back now. Zhao Ying wiped the sweat off her forehead. She nodded lightly and looked around. The 2 wood houses were more than 10 meters apart. She had only lived here for a month, but she felt like home. It was quiet and comfortable here. All right, go wash up. We'll leave today. Chu Li smiled. Zhao Ying asked, how do we transport it back? She looked at the 20 sacks. They would have to hire 2 carriages. She did not expect the deity's beard to be so big. Chu Li shook his head and smiled. Just leave it here. We don't have to worry about it. Leave it here? Zhao Ying was surprised. Chu Li smiled. Someone will come to collect it. We don't have to worry about the rest. We'll leave after breakfast. All right. Zhao Ying nodded and tilted her head. Brother, are you sure about this? Chu Li laughed. I trust Lady CEO Ying. There won't be any mistakes. It's been a month of hard work. What if something goes wrong? Do you want to wait here and see someone before leaving? Zhao Ying asked. She had seen how hard Chu Li worked. He took care of the deity's beard every day, weeding, fertilizing, and watering. He never left. He even stayed in the field at night. She did not know that Chu Li was cultivating with the help of the deity's beard. She thought that he was worried about wild beasts. Chu Li smiled. Zhao Ying saw that he had made up his mind. She was upset and started cooking. The 2 of them ate and left the ravine on horseback. Zhao looked back from time to time to see who had entered the ravine. Chu Li whipped his horse and galloped. Soon, they could no longer see the ravine. Zhao Ying looked at him unwillingly and sighed. She could only follow him. Not long after they left, a group of 100 cavalrymen galloped over. They were as imposing as tigers. They maintained their formation even as they galloped. It was obvious that they were well-trained cavalrymen. There were 100 of them and 200 horses. Each person rode on 2 horses. They were travel-worn and exuded a murderous aura. They did not say a word and continued their journey in silence. When they arrived at the ravine, more than 10 cavalrymen entered the ravine. The rest formed a defensive formation. Their gazes were sharp and cold, as if they were indifferent to all life. Soon, a cavalryman left the ravine and brought a few more cavalrymen in. Each of them carried 2 sacks and came out. Chapter 21. As they galloped, Zhao Ying kept looking back. She could not help but want to go back and see if the 20 sacks were still there and if someone else had taken them. However, Chu Li's face was dark, and he did not say a word. She knew that it was useless to say anything more, and it would not change his mind. She shook her head secretly. Chu Li was really open-minded. It was good to hide and watch from the side so that he could be at ease. If he just left like that, it would be very unreliable. She always felt that something was wrong. At noon, the sun was scorching. Chu Li entered the forest to give the horse some water and rest. The weather was not suitable for traveling. Sitting under the shade of a pine tree, Chu Li shook his head. "Sister, you are not suitable to be a protector." "Why?" Zhao Ying sat opposite him and waved a branch. "My martial arts is too weak." Chu Li shook his head. "You are too curious. As a protector, you have to be deaf and mute. If you can't do it, it will be very dangerous." Zhao Ying frowned. "I have to know the whole story so that I can take precautions. A protector has to be vigilant at all times, regardless of whether there is danger or not." Chu Li shook his head. "As for you, your curiosity will affect your judgment and distract you. I just want to see who will take the deity's beard. What's the difference between knowing and not knowing?" Chu Li laughed. "The deity's beard is for the horses. Think about it. Who will take it? It will be the people from the public house." Chu Li laughed. Zhao Ying rolled her eyes at him. "Is it not? Will the third lady do such a flashy thing? Then who will it be? Where will the deity's beard be most useful?" Zhao Ying tilted her head and thought for a while. If the young masters were to race horses with others, of course, the stronger the better. Chu Li looked at her helplessly and sighed. The army, the cavalry. Zhao Ying let out a soft cry. She did not think of this. Chu Li said, "Only in the army, with the cavalry, the deity's beard will be most useful." "Brother, you mean that the deity's beard will be sent to the army?" Zhao Ying's expression immediately changed. She looked around and whispered, "Will we be silenced?" "Hey, if it involves the army, it's a confidential matter. The High Duke's public house can't be in contact with the army. How can we not be in danger if we know?" Zhao Ying's face was taut as she lowered her voice and said nervously, "The High Duke's public house was not allowed to have any dealings with the military. This was a clear order from the imperial court, just like how a prince was not allowed to befriend a minister." "It's not that serious." Chu Li smiled. "It's fine as long as you don't tell anyone." Zhao Ying heaved a sigh of relief and blushed. Only then did she understand why Chu Li insisted on leaving. She was foolish enough to sneak a peek. If she were to be exposed, she would be in real danger. She would be forced to silence him. Thinking of this, she stood up and drew her sword to practice the flying swallow sword technique. Chu Li sat under the shade of the tree and lazily gave a few pointers. 2 hours later, the sun was not as scorching as before. The two of them got on their horses again and hurried on their journey. In the evening, as the sun set in the west, the tired birds returned to the forest. Chu Li looked at the setting sun and suddenly reined in his horse. Zhao Ying also stopped and looked around cautiously. She held onto her sword and looked at Chu Li. "Brother, there's an ambush." Chu Li frowned and sighed. "Another robbery?" Zhao Ying said hatefully. "This raging tiger troop." They stepped into the boundary of the raging tiger mountain again. She was always worried that there would be a robbery, but she did not think that they would not be able to escape. Chu Li thought for a while and turned his horse around. Zhao Ying quickly followed. Brother? We can't go ahead. Chu Li shook his head. It's just a bunch of robbers. Let's just kill them. Zhao Ying was eager to try. She was no longer an ignorant person. Her swordsmanship was strong, and her inner energy was profound. She was close to perfecting her acquired mastery. As long as she did not encounter an innate master from the Raging Tiger troop, she would not have a problem. Innate masters usually would not come down from the mountain to rob. Chu Li shook his head. His omniscient mirror had a strong sixth sense to seek luck and avoid danger. It had already given him a warning that there was danger ahead. But we can't just go back, right? Zhao Ying said unwillingly. Chu Li said, let's wait. Wait until when? They have to return to the mountain eventually. What if they take turns to stand guard? Then let's wait for the masters to return. Chu Li frowned. There should be innate masters. Zhao Ying's eyes widened. She opened her mouth but closed it again. She nodded. We have to guard against them. But innate masters are shameless enough to rob us. Chu Li rode his horse into the forest. He tied the horses and sat on some dried leaves. Let's go in the middle of the night. Zhao Ying nodded. The two of them sat cross-legged and adjusted their breathing. It was midnight. The moon was in the middle of the sky. Chu Li opened his eyes. Let's go. Leave the horses. Not riding. It's too noisy. Let's use light body technique to hurry. Zhao Ying looked at the two horses reluctantly. She had feelings for them. She was reluctant to give them up. The old horses know the way. They will find their way back. Really, the horses in the public house are specially trained. They can go back on their own. There were excellent trainers in the public house. The horses were trained to be very smart. Only the owner could get close to them. They also knew the way and could run back on their own. No one could catch them. All right, then. Zhao Ying touched the two horses reluctantly. She let go of the rope and took some food from the saddle. However, Chu Li stopped her. The two of them had a travel light. An extra bag of dried meat would be a burden at a critical moment. The two of them used light body technique and galloped for about 10 miles. Suddenly, they saw a bonfire. Two trees were burning in the middle of the road, illuminating the faces around them. There were more than 10 people sitting around the bonfire, not saying a word. Zhao Ying looked at Chu Li. Chu Li signaled her to be careful. He quietly passed through the forest and went around them. In the forest, he would stop abruptly, walk quickly, and stop again and again. At first, Zhao Ying felt that it was very strange, but later on, she realized that he was avoiding the traps one after another. There were a lot of traps in this forest, and it was impossible to guard against them. Touching one would alert the group of people. Furthermore, she discovered that there was a group of people hiding in the forest, and they were silent. She thought that it was a close call. Did they set up an ambush just for the two of them? They killed too many people and angered the Raging Tiger troop. Did they set up an ambush for the two of them? When she thought of this, Zhao Ying broke out in a cold sweat. They must have sent out an innate master. It was too dangerous. Chu Li brought her along as they moved stealthily, avoiding all the traps and the people who were lying in ambush. They managed to escape without any mishap and entered a new forest. His speed suddenly increased, and Zhao Ying was still dragged along even though she used her light body technique. Chapter 22. We dodged it. Zhao Ying lowered her voice. Chu Li nodded lightly. We finally dodged it. What a huge formation. Was it for us? Yes. Zhao Ying frowned. We took so long to come back. Have they been like this all this time? She was shocked. It had been a month. They had probably been on guard for a whole month. Their defenses were still so tight. This was not something a bunch of rabble could do. It required rigorous training. The Raging Tiger troop was just an ordinary lush forest troop. For them to go this far, it was obvious how angry they were. Chu Li pondered. Among the people we killed, there might be some important people. If that's the case, Zhao Ying suddenly understood. Could it be the young master of the troop? It's possible. Chu Li smiled. He vaguely felt that there was something wrong with the identity of the three bald men. They were killed by him. He seemed to be called the 10th master. Could he be the 10th master of the Raging Tiger troop? That was interesting. These people are horrible, Zhao Ying said with hatred. Their deaths are not to be regretted. I will report this to my superiors and ask them to kill these scum. The raging tiger troop had defiled countless women and killed countless men, yet they allowed them to roam free and unfettered. God was blind. Our mission this time is top secret. Damn it. Train hard. Once you've mastered your martial arts, you will destroy the raging tiger troop. How long will that take? Zhao Ying said unwillingly. Even if I become an innate master, there are innate masters in the raging tiger troop. Chu Li said, there will always be a way. Zhao Ying rolled her eyes. She frowned and thought of a way to destroy the raging tiger troop. After resting for a while, she suddenly felt a need to go to the bathroom. She looked at Chu Li embarrassedly. Chu Li was using the omniscient mirror to observe the surrounding 3 miles. There was no movement, but this was only temporary. He thought that the raging tiger troop would not just set up an ambush in one place. There must be many checkpoints. Zhao Ying looked at Chu Li again. Chu Li felt something was wrong and turned to look at her. Zhao Ying's cheeks were red. She said shyly, I'm going out for a while. Chu Li was startled. He immediately understood and whispered, don't go too far. Don't be careless. Zhao Ying nodded and ran away. She knew that Chu Li's ability was profound, and if she got too close, he would definitely hear her. That would be too embarrassing, so she ran a little further away. Chu Li had no choice but to put away the omniscient mirror. Otherwise, it would be too dirty. After a while, Chu Li frowned. Could it be a major? He held back his doubts and did not use the omniscient mirror. After a while, he could not hold it in anymore and activated the omniscient mirror. Zhao Ying was nowhere to be seen within a 3-mile radius. His heart sank, and he stood up. The omniscient mirror went into detail and followed Zhao Ying's footprints. Soon, it stopped under a pine tree. There was another person's footprint there. It was barely visible and could not be seen by ordinary people, but could not be hidden from the omniscient mirror. Chu Li speculated that this person's light body technique was top-notch, and his inner energy was deep and exquisite. He was definitely an innate master. This was too much of a coincidence. This innate master must have just chased after him. Otherwise, he would have been discovered by the omniscient mirror. Coincidentally, when he put away the omniscient mirror, he appeared and caught Zhao Ying. He took a deep breath. His anger and anxiety were surging, but he was suppressed by the omniscient mirror. The most important thing now was to save Zhao Ying. Otherwise, he did not know what would happen. Thinking of a woman falling into the raging tiger troop made him anxious. Although his heart was burning, his mind was still as calm as ice. He used the omniscient mirror and followed the person's footprints. The person's light body technique was superb. Even with Zhao Ying, the footprints were barely visible. He needed the omniscient mirror to see them clearly. He chased after them. He was as fast as lightning, but he could not catch up. He was too far behind. Chu Li sighed to himself. It seemed like he could only barge into the raging tiger troop. He did not have full confidence, but in this situation, he could not call for help. He could only barge in alone. Zhao Ying could not wait for even a moment, lest something tragic happened. After chasing for more than 10 miles, his expression changed. A group of people appeared in front of him, blocking his way. There were cliffs on both sides. There was no other way but to barge in. 24 people, each holding a long knife, looked fierce and had a faint murderous aura. Chu Li could tell at a glance that they had killed more than one person. How many people had the raging tiger troop killed? Young man. A man stepped forward and pointed his knife at Chu Li. Stop. The other 23 people rushed over with their knives. Chu Li frowned. Under the omniscient mirror, their thoughts could not be hidden. They killed no one. It did not matter if it was Chu Li or not. As long as they saw a man or woman holding a weapon, they would kill them. His face darkened. He was furious. Who knew how many people had been killed in the past month? He did not kill them, but they died because of him. He felt guilty. His anger turned into murderous intent. He pulled out his sword, and in a flash, he slipped into the crowd like a ghost. The sword flashed. In a flash, one person fell. In the blink of an eye, 24 men were lying on the ground, clutching their throats and trembling. Their blood seeped into the soil and turned dark red. exuding a strong smell of blood. Chu Li shook his long sword and used a man's shirt to wipe it clean. He shook his body to get rid of the smell of blood on his clothes and continued to chase. These 24 people had good martial arts, but they were all below the innate mastery level. In front of him, they were no different than targets. He only felt delighted and had no hesitation. His figure fluttered as he chased after the footprints. After another 10 miles, he came to a small pavilion. It was a pavilion for resting. It was full of traces of wind and rain. A middle-aged man in a green shirt stood in the pavilion with his hands behind his back. His face was like jade, and his green shirt fluttered in the wind. Chu Li came to the pavilion and glanced at the middle-aged man. He looked at his feet and frowned. "Are you waiting for me here?" The middle-aged man stroked his beard and smiled. "Are you the lover of that young lady?" He had a sharp nose and a handsome face. His smile was like the sun, giving people a good impression. Chu Li said coldly, "Are you from the Raging Tiger Troop?" "Rank 5th. The middle-aged man smiled. "I have not asked for your name yet. Don't worry, the young lady is not in danger. We are only inviting her to the mountain as a guest. We will not hurt her." "Ranked 5th. Chu Li scoffed. "How many people are in charge of your troop?" 10 brothers. The middle-aged man sighed. "The 10th brother was useless and was killed by you. He did not improve himself all these years and did not become an innate master. He deserved to be killed." Chu Li looked at him coldly. The middle-aged man stroked his beard and sighed. "But we are all brothers. We must avenge his death. So we had to do something. Do you understand?" Chu Li said coldly, "So you killed the innocent?" The middle-aged man shook his head and laughed. "Heaven and earth are heartless. Who is truly innocent in this world? Aren't you afraid of angering the public by doing this?" Chu Li looked at him curiously. The middle-aged man shook his head and laughed. "What do we have to be afraid of? Who would dare to attack the Raging Tiger Troop?" "How arrogant!" Chu Li sneered. The middle-aged man smiled and looked at him. "You are a genius. Which faction do you belong to? I am afraid that I will scare you." The middle-aged man stroked his beard and laughed. He shook his head. "Then all the more reason to keep you. Why don't you join the Raging Tiger Troop?" Chu Li shook his head. The young man stroked his beard and smiled. "The Raging Tiger Troop has the most freedom. It is much more comfortable than in the faction. We have many innate masters, and we can spar with each other. We are free and unfettered." "How many innate masters does the Raging Tiger Troop have?" 9. Chu Li used the omniscient mirror to check and knew that he was lying. The Raging Tiger Troop had a total of 12 innate masters. The 10th one did not reach the innate master's boundary because he went mad during his cultivation. He lost his martial arts and had to start from scratch. The other 13 were all innate masters. The Raging Tiger Troop had a rule. As long as one reached the innate master level, he could become a Raging Tiger Troop's leader. 9 innate masters can do whatever they want. Chu Li shook his head. "They're asking for it." "My junior sisters, where are you hiding?" "In the troop." The middle-aged man smiled. "As long as you can break into the troop, we will let you go. Is that fair?" Chu Li frowned. Half of what he said was true, and the other half was false. Zhao Ying had indeed been taken to the Raging Tiger Troop, but it was impossible to let her go. They wanted to kill him and keep Zhao Ying as their plaything. Chu Li looked at him. "So, I have to get past you first?" "Of course." The middle-aged man stroked his beard and smiled. "If you can't get past me, then don't even think about entering the troop. Brother, you are still young. It is a pity. Are you sure you don't want to join us?" Chu Li pulled out his long sword and looked at him quietly. "Come." "Sigh. What a pity." The middle-aged man shook his head and sighed. He looked regretful. Chu Li activated 3 layers of the infinite azure sea and appeared in front of him like a ghost. The tip of his sword pierced into the man's chest. Chu Li quickly pulled the sword out and slit his throat. Ding! The sound of metal clashing could be heard. The man blocked his throat with his sword and stared at Chu Li in disbelief. Chu Li did not stop and stabbed him again. The man raised his sword, but his movement suddenly stopped. He could only watch as the long sword pierced into his throat. He pulled the sword out, and blood spurted out of his throat. He wanted to say something, but he could not. He wanted to scold Chu for sneaking an attack. A strange inner energy suddenly drilled into his body and disrupted the circulation of his inner energy. With this disruption, he could not dodge the long sword. Chu pulled out his sword and retreated. He looked at the man quietly and said coldly, "Don't worry. Your brothers will accompany you on your journey." The man raised his finger with difficulty. His body gradually tilted and finally fell to the ground with a thud. He was still trembling. Fresh blood flowed out and dyed the pagoda red. Chapter 23. He flew up and followed the footprints. After the middle-aged man took Zhao Ying to the gazebo, someone took her away. Chu followed the footprints, but he did not know the location of the raging tiger troop. He chased for 5 miles and arrived at the middle of the raging tiger troop. He was confused. The troop should be built halfway up the mountain, but there was no raging tiger troop within 3 miles. It could be built on the other side of the mountain. The person who took Zhao Ying was not as good as the middle-aged man. The footprints were much clearer. It could be that he was deliberately leading Chu into an ambush. With the omniscient mirror, Chu had nothing to fear. He could see the ambush in advance. He could avoid it if he wanted to. He used the omniscient mirror to see a group of people. About a mile away from Chu, where the footprints passed, 4 bald men were sitting quietly on a huge rock. Their eyes were closed, and they looked calm and solemn. Their bodies were filled with murderous intent. They came prepared, and they did not come with good intentions. Chu could tell from their attire that they were masters from the raging tiger troop. They were all innate masters. Did they think that they were safe? Chu slowed down. Spiritual energy surged through his body. He had entered the innate mastery's boundary. The scripture of life and death had improved as well. He could manipulate the spiritual energy of the plants and trees. In such an environment, his inner energy was endless. He was fearless. When he was about 100 meters away, the 4 bald men were still sitting quietly on the rock. They slowly opened their eyes and looked at him coldly, as if they were looking at an ant. One of the bald men snorted, "You are that boy. How dare you? Beauty is the bane of all heroes." The bald man next to him snorted, "He is so young. How could he resist a beauty? He had to come." "You are from the raging tiger troop?" Chu asked. "That's right. My junior sister was kidnapped by you." "That's right. Hand her over, as long as you can defeat us. Take this." Chu suddenly swung his left hand, and a cold light shot out. Ugh! The bald man in front covered his throat. There was a flying knife in his throat. He stared at Chu in disbelief. He slowly fell to the ground. His body trembled, but he did not die immediately. "Old Six!" The 3 bald men cried out in surprise. They sprang up and pounced towards Chu. Their long swords were like a silver waterfall hanging in the air. Chu fluttered backward and landed on a tree. When they got close to him, he leaped sideways and easily dodged them. The 3 bald men also landed on the tree and then sprang at him. Ugh! Chu swung his arm again, and a cold light shot out. A bald man fell from the sky, clutching his throat. Bam! He landed heavily on the ground and stomped a few times. Then he stiffened and stopped moving. There's something strange about this kid's flying knife. Let's go. The remaining 2 bald men turned around and ran. Chu sneered. Inner energy from all directions surged into his body, and after overlapping, his speed became incredibly fast. Once again, he shot out 2 flying blades, and the 2 men died without any resistance. Chu let out a long sigh of relief and leaned against the tree. The spiritual force of the plants nourished his meridians. His meridians were greatly burdened by the 4 consecutive slashes. The combination of the life and death scripture, the innate realm, and the sacrificial saber technique was indeed shocking. If they were in the city, Chu would not be able to do it so easily without the help of plants. However, the current environment was the best for him. The sacrificial saber technique was already powerful, fast, and accurate. When the flying blades were about to reach them, the life and death scripture suddenly activated, and the sudden inner energy drilled into their bodies, causing their movements to pause. This pause was the moment of life and death. He took a few breaths, and while letting the spiritual force of the plants nourish his meridians, he continued to follow the footprints. After about 200 meters, he went around the mountainside and arrived in front of a cave. The entrance of the raging tiger troop was actually a cave. One man could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. Not to mention the traps, there must be countless hidden weapons. He thought for a moment, and then let out a long whistle. He picked up a boulder and threw it into the dark cave. The boulder was about half the height of a person, and it was about the same size as a person going in. Bang, 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 bang. A series of sounds were heard, and Chu-Li went in. The hidden weapons were all over the ground. Blue lights flashed occasionally, and a sweet smell wafted in the air. This was caused by the poison on the hidden weapons. His feet did not touch the ground, and he glided forward. Soon his eyes brightened. In front of him was a valley. He was standing on a mountainside, and there was a group of people standing below. Chu-Li glanced around. This valley was really a good place. It was warm and pleasant, and it was very well hidden. There must be other exits in the valley. No wonder they were so unscrupulous. If it were not for the footprints, even with the omniscient mirror, it would have taken him a lot of effort to find this place. The mountainside was about 100 meters away from the valley, and it was 30 stories high. The group of people below looked at him coldly. Their eyes were like knives, as if they wanted to cut him into pieces. Chu-Li glanced at them. There were 122 people. There were 6 innate masters, 34 perfected acquire masters, and the rest were nothing to worry about. However, all of them were holding long knives, and their murderous aura was not to be underestimated. Chu-Li thought that he still had 10 flying blades, enough to kill innate masters. He looked carefully with the omniscient mirror and found Zhaoing. He let out a sigh of relief. "Young man, if you want your wife, you'd better surrender. Or else, we'll have a good time with her first." A bald man with a ring scar on his head said coldly. Chu-Li glanced at the bald man. The ring scar on his head showed that he was originally a monk. 6 ring scars meant that his status was not low. Chu-Li did not know which temple he came from. He came from the Temple of Autumn, so he knew that there were good and bad monks mixed together. He could not be treated as a group. The monks of the Tempest Temple were strict, and because of the strict enforcement of the law, they did not allow the slightest bit of selfishness. The other temples might not be the same. Chu-Li said lightly, "If you dare to touch my sister, I'll wipe out the entire raging tiger troop." "Huh?" The ring-scarred man laughed out loud. His majestic body made a sound like a bronze bell. He laughed twice. "All right, I'd like to see if you have the ability to do so. Come on down." Chu-Li scoffed. "You guys are really cowards. You don't dare to fight me one-on-one. The raging tiger troop? You guys are even more cowardly than a mouse." "Leader, I'll go," a skinny bald man said in a deep voice. "We can't let this brat be so arrogant." Chu-Li mocked them in front of everyone. They had always been arrogant and looked down on everyone. How could they allow Chu-Li to be so presumptuous? "Third brother, be careful. This brat is a bit strange." The ring-scarred man frowned. "I know," the bald man said in a deep voice. His body was skinny, but every move he made contained great strength, like a leopard. A wide bluestone staircase led to where Chu-Li was. The bald man climbed up the stairs like a monkey and leaped towards Chu-Li. With his speed, 100 meters could be covered in the blink of an eye. Chu-Li drew his sword and used the omniscient mirror to observe the man inside and out. The speed at which the man's inner energy was circulating, the rhythm of his movements, and the flexion and extension of his muscles were all clearly displayed in his mind. When he got close, the bald man roared and pounced on Chu-Li like a ferocious tiger. Chu-Li stabbed, and the sword flashed. Then he floated backwards. The bald man covered his throat and stared at him. He slowly fell down the stairs. The ring-scar man flew to catch him and put him down slowly after he landed. His face was so gloomy that it looked like it was going to drip water. There was no hope left. The sword pierced through his throat. Blood gushed out like a fountain, and he stopped breathing. It was obvious that his brain was crushed. It was extremely vicious. He looked up at Chu-Li, who was in the air, his eyes flashing fiercely. Chu-Li shook his head. "That's all you've got." His sword strike caused everyone to feel a chill in their hearts. It was too fast and too ruthless, and even they didn't have the confidence to face this strike. One strike to kill, one strike to decide life and death. The awe-inspiring third leader had already become a corpse. Chuli said, "Come on, leader. Good boy. Come down, or don't blame me for destroying a flower." The ring-scar man sneered. This brat was so strange that he could not fight him head-on. Otherwise, the losses would be too great. It seemed that the brothers who went to block the way did not encounter him, but were defeated by him. Thinking of this, his murderous intent grew. He had to kill this brat no matter what. Chuli sneered. "If I come down, will I be able to save my junior sister?" He activated the omniscient mirror, and the entire valley appeared in his mind. Zhao Ying was sitting cross-legged in a hidden cave. The cave entrance was covered by green vines. If it was not for the omniscient mirror, he would not have found this cave. There was an innate master sitting in a cave about 100 meters south of him. Zhao Ying sat in the pitch-black cave. The cold air kept drilling into her pores. She couldn't move at all. It was extremely cold. She tried to think. Her acupuncture point was sealed, and there was a master beside her. There was no chance for her to escape. She did not know if Chu Li could find her. She was conflicted. She wanted Chu Li to find her and save her, but she was also worried that he would find her. The Raging Tiger Troop was a dangerous place with an innate master. If Chu Li came, he would die. Chu Li's laughter suddenly came. She was happy but anxious at the same time. She tried to get up, but her body was weak, and she could not move at all. The bald man beside her opened his eyes and stared at her coldly. "Stay here." Zhao Ying opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her acupuncture point had been sealed. The bald man sneered. "You're an infatuated man. He would give up his life for you. Since you're here, don't even think about leaving. Good people don't live long. This is the reality. You should just give up." Zhao Ying opened her mouth and stared at him. The bald man closed his eyes and ignored her. Chu Li stood on the stairs and looked down at the crowd. He suddenly laughed. "All right, I'll come down now." He tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and dashed out horizontally, covering 100 meters in just 2 steps. He activated the art of infinite azure sea and shot into the cave. Before the bald man could react, a beam of cold light shot into his chest and appeared in front of Zhao Ying. Zhao Ying's eyes widened. She was overjoyed. Chu Li reached out and pulled her onto his back. He turned around and rushed to the cave entrance. His inner energy flowed into her body, and all the acupuncture points were cleared. Zhao Ying quickly said, "Brother, why are you here?" Chu Li smiled. "Why wouldn't I be here?" The two of them had already reached the cave entrance. A flash of a knife suddenly appeared. Ding! Chu Li pointed his long sword, and the knife and sword clashed. He quickly followed up with another flash of a knife, followed by a few more flashes of the knife. The people outside wanted to seal the cave entrance and trap them. Zhao Ying quickly pulled out her sword and stabbed it. Ding! The long sword flew out. The inner energy flowed through her arm and into her meridians. She felt a sharp pain, as if her meridians were being torn apart. Fortunately, a warm inner energy flowed into her chest and dissolved the inner energy. Zhao Ying was shocked. An innate master. Chapter 24. Chu Li whispered, "Be a good girl and don't move." "We can't get out?" Zhao Ying shook her numb arms and whispered. The two of them stood at the entrance of the cave, unable to get out. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. "Hold on tight. Let's get out." Zhao Ying quickly hugged his neck and laid on his back. His solid back gave her warmth and a sense of security. It was as if there was nothing to be afraid of as long as she lay there. Chu Li took a deep breath and overlaid the infinite azure sea again. With the two combined, his power doubled. Then he used his sword to protect his body and rushed out. Ding, 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 ding. Chu Li shot out of the cave with the sound of swords clashing. There were 4 bald men standing at the entrance of the cave, glaring at him. Chu Li glided away with the 4 men chasing after him. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the entrance of the Raging Tiger Troop. Just as he was about to enter the cave, a sudden flash of light appeared. It was from the ring-scarred man. Chu Li had the omniscient mirror, so he had already seen that the ring-scarred man was hiding in the cave and was ready to strike. Chu Li moved his body lightly and dodged the blade. Then he thrust his long sword forward and hit the ring-scarred man's long blade before he could gather his strength. Ding! The long sword flew out of his hand. The ring-scarred man did not care. He straightened his body, and his whole body suddenly expanded. There was a faint golden light around his body. He swung his fist at Chu Li. Chu Li pulled out his sword and stabbed at the fist. Ding! The sound of metal clashing was heard. Chu Li was shocked. The sentient menace? At least he knows something. The ring-scar man sneered and swung his fist again. Chu Li was shocked. The sentient menace was an antique study of the Tempest Temple. Could it be that this guy was a disciple of the Tempest Temple? That would be troublesome. The Tempest Temple was the leader of the 4 major sections. How dare you? Chu Li said in a low voice. A traitor of the temple dares to be so arrogant. The Tempest Temple had strict rules. He must have broken them. The Temple Commandment Hall would hunt him down no matter what. Once he was caught, he would be killed. Under such circumstances, he actually dared to openly build a stronghold. It could be said that he was extremely daring. From the looks of it, he was determined to kill him. Once his identity was exposed, he would not be able to live. No matter how strong he was, he would not be able to escape the pursuit of the Tempest Temple. As he thought of this, Chu Li suddenly glided backward and faced the 4 men who were chasing after him. The 4 men surrounded him. Chu Li's body moved swiftly, and his sword moved like lightning. They were all innate masters, and his inner energy was endless. Coupled with the infinite azure sea, he was able to suppress the 4 men. In the blink of an eye, he stabbed one of them. "Move aside, I'll do it," the ring-scarred man shouted in a deep voice. His body flashed with a golden light as he charged at Chu Li. His palms glowed faintly as he faced Chu Li's sword head-on. Zhao Ying was secretly anxious. This guy's eyeballs seemed to have turned yellow, and his whole body seemed to have been painted with a layer of gold paint. It was really strange, but really powerful. It was as if he was really made of copper, and no matter how she stabbed him, she couldn't hurt him. Chu Li glided away to avoid him, then flashed behind another innate master and stabbed him in the back. The other 2 saw that the situation was not good and quickly ran away, but they were chased by Chu Li. He avoided the ring-scarred man and first took care of the other innate masters. The 2 levels of the infinite azure sea were overlaid, and the spiritual force of the plants within a 200-meter radius continuously flowed into him, nourishing his meridians. He knew about the sentient menace. There was a description of it in the library. The sentient menace was powerful and impenetrable, but the depth of the level determined the length of time it could be maintained. More importantly, it consumed a lot of inner energy. An innate master's inner energy was endless, but it could not keep up with the consumption of the sentient menace. Therefore, the sentient menace could not be maintained for long. Chu Li did not believe that this guy who broke the precept could maintain it for too long. The 2 men's body technique was not as good as Chu Li's, and they were in the cave. In the end, they could not escape from Chu Li's pursuit and were killed one by one. They wanted to die with Chu Li, but they could not. Zhao Ying watched the innate masters being killed like pigs. She was excited and surprised. She really did not expect him to have such martial arts. No wonder Brother Zhuo was not his opponent. The difference was too big. She was full of doubts. She had to ask, did he have a fortuitous encounter? When she thought of this, she became excited. Any martial artist would look forward to having a fortuitous encounter, obtaining a peerless secret manual, or consuming a heavenly fruit, shocking the world with a single brilliant feat, becoming invincible in the world, and running amok in the world. In the end, Chu Li faced the ring-scarred man. His sword flashed, and the sound of metal clashing was heard. Zhao Ying was dazzled. She did not expect a sword to be so fast. Chu Li's sword was like lightning, and the ring-scarred man did not have time to dodge. In a short while, he was completely naked. Zhao Ying blushed and did not dare to look down. The sword stabbed into the ring-scarred man's body, but it was like it had met with metal. It could not pierce through, as if it could not do anything to him. However, Chu Li was not discouraged and continued to attack. The ring-scarred man sneered. He did not care about Chu Li's sword. He only wanted to hit Chu Li. Unfortunately, Chu Li's body technique was so fast that he could not touch him, like a stupid bear. The ring-scarred man said in a low voice, "You can't break the sentient menace." Chu Li scoffed, "I don't believe it. Let's see who can exhaust the other to death." The ring-scarred man scoffed. He wanted to retreat. Where there's life, there's hope. If he waited until his inner energy was exhausted, then it would be troublesome. He had to leave quickly. He wanted to leave, but he could not show it. If he was seen through, he would chase after him relentlessly. Chu Li suddenly turned around and left. He flew out of the cave, slid down the stone steps, and landed in the valley. Then, he waved his sword and started a massacre. These masters who had not reached the innate mastery level were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. They were defenseless. Chu Li did not hesitate to kill them. He had no mercy. These people deserved to die. If he let them live, who knew how many people would be harmed? Brother. Zhao Ding felt numb as she watched from behind. Chu Li's sword was too fast. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 people fell to the ground. It was as if he was cutting grass. She could not bear to watch. Chu Li scoffed. They deserved to die 100 times for what they did. Zhao Ying did not say anything. It was reasonable, but she could not bear to watch these people being killed without any resistance. She could only use her rationality to calm her heart and shut her eyes. The valley was filled with endless curses. They were all ferocious. In the face of Chu Li's massacre, they were not afraid. Instead, they cursed and pounced on him. Each of them wanted to die together with Chu Li. They wanted to catch Chu Li before they died. They wanted to block him and give their companions a chance. Chu Li's sword was like lightning. His body technique was extremely fast. None of them succeeded. Chapter 25. Chu Li sneered and pretended not to know. He slaughtered all the people from the Raging Tiger troop, leaving no one alive. He found those who tried to hide and killed them without mercy. There was a long line of buildings in the valley. Small courtyards were connected together, and there was a hall in the middle. The hall was covered with a thick carpet, and the aroma of meat and wine lingered in the air. 50 women were naked and lying on the ground like white sheep, waiting for the men to play with them. They heard the screams and curses. They trembled in fear, but did not dare to come out to see what was happening. When Chu Li came in, they all widened their eyes and looked at him with fear and curiosity. Chu Li glanced at the women and did not change his expression. Zhao Ying blushed. Chu Li whispered, "Sister, help them settle down. Send them home? Why don't they stay here for now?" Okay. Zhao Ying thought about it and nodded helplessly. They would not have a good life if they went back. It was better to stay here. Chu Li said, "Choose a leader and let them make their own arrangements. This place must be sealed and no outsiders can come in. They can be self-sufficient and there will be no danger. If you are worried, you can come and take a look in the future." Okay. Zhao Ying nodded. Chu Li put her down and flew out of the cave. He caught up with the Scar Man 10 miles away. His face was pale and he was panting like a bull. His movements were slow and sluggish, as if he was injured. He had already escaped to the side of a large river. The river flowed from west to east. When he was about to jump into the river, Chu Li suddenly appeared in front of him and blocked him with his sword. "Young brother, let people go when possible," the Scar Man said. Chu Li shook his head and sighed. "You have sinned too much. I cannot let you live." He raised his hand. Chi! A white light flashed and shot into the Scar Man's throat. He flew backwards. Chu Li leaped into the air and caught him. If he really fell into the river, he would not be able to find his body. The Scarred Man held his throat and widened his eyes. Chu Li said, "Where is the secret manual?" The middle-aged man with the scar suddenly sneered and looked at him mockingly. His smile grew wider and wider, and his body suddenly trembled. Then his body sank, and he breathed his last. Chu Li slowly put him down and exhaled 2 mouthfuls of murky air. He had used the Eternity Blade just now, which was the true power of his entire body. It was a blade that was more powerful than usual. He knew that his opponent had a trump card. The disciples of the Tempest Temple were not to be underestimated. If he could not kill him in one strike, he would use a secret technique to stimulate his potential and risk his life to kill him. The surging spiritual energy in the surroundings gushed into his body, replenishing his empty meridians and nourishing his meridians, allowing him to recover swiftly. He carried the corpse and glided up the mountain. He ran all the way to the top of the mountain and stopped under a pine tree. This old pine tree seemed to be dying, but it was still full of vitality. Half of its branches extended out of the cliff, while the other half remained at the top of the mountain, gently swaying in the wind. Chu dug a meter away from its roots. The soil was hard, but it could not stop Chu Li's long sword. Soon, a ding sound was heard as he hit a stone slab. Chu Li used his sword to pick up the stone slab and quickly retreated. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A large amount of blue light shot out like rain. If he did not know about this trap beforehand, it would have been difficult to avoid it. It was extremely vicious. When the blue light fell to the ground, Chu Li took another stone and threw it. Bang! A dull sound was heard. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Another blue light shot out. After the blue light fell to the ground, Chu Li went closer and picked up a stone box with his sword. When he opened it, there was a yellowed silk book with the words "Sentient Menace" written on it. Chu Li picked it up and flipped through it. There were 36 pages in total, and each page had a posture. The 36 postures were vivid and lifelike. He could not see the monk's face clearly, but he could see the changes in each muscle. The inner energy of the monk, one blue and one red, was clearly marked. Chu Li flipped through it once and imprinted it in his mind. He then flipped through it again to make sure there were no mistakes. He gently pressed on the silk book with his inner energy and carefully placed it back into the stone box. The stone box was buried, and everything returned to its original state. The next person to open the stone box would find the silk book. However, as soon as they touched the silk book, they would immediately be blown away by the wind and turned into dust. They would definitely be in a bad mood. Thinking about this, Chu Li smiled. He was in a good mood. He buried the body of the ring-scarred man next to the stone box and flew back to the cave. When he entered the raging tiger troop, Zhao Ying had already gathered all the women together. There were a total of 160 women, and all of them were beautiful. The women who were not beautiful had already been killed by them. The ones that were left behind were worth toying with. Chu Li did not disturb Zhao Ying. He found the bedroom of the ring-scarred man and rummaged through it. He found 300,000 silver notes and put them in his pocket. He then flew into the hall and came to Zhao Ying's side. "Sister, let's go." Zhao Ying looked at the women reluctantly. She told them not to worry. She would seal the entrance of the cave, and no one would be able to enter. She told them to live in peace, and that she would visit them when she had time. Chu Li and Zhao Ying sealed the cave and covered it with green vines to ensure that no one would be able to see through it. Just in case, Chu Li moved a huge rock into the cave. Even an innate master would have to spend a lot of effort to enter the cave. Those who were below the innate master level would not be able to move the rock. Seeing this, Zhao Ying was relieved. "Brother, they are so pitiful," the two of them said as they used their light body technique. Chu Li smiled. "They are pitiful. Let's find a place to settle them down in the future." "How do we settle them down?" Zhao Ying shook her head and sighed. She felt helpless. "Why don't we report this to the public house? They must have a way." Chu Li shook his head. "Why not? Let's open a restaurant. 2 restaurants should be enough to settle them down." I found some silver." Chu Li took out the silver notes and handed it to Zhao Ying. Zhao Ying was stunned. She took the notes and looked at them. Her expression changed. She looked at him in surprise. 300,000 silver? Chu Li nodded. "It's enough to open 2 restaurants." But Zhao Ying hesitated. Chapter 26. Zhao Ying nodded. "Opening a restaurant. Will the public house agree?" "You don't know. The public house encourages this." Chu Li smiled. "Sister, don't worry. Leave it to me. I will handle it." He had lived 2 lives and had a thirst for power. He was more concerned about the bigger picture. He had analyzed all of this before. The public house had strict rules that forbade bullying and using their status as guards. If they did, They would be punished according to the public house's rules. Most people thought that the public house forbade guards from doing business, but Chuli knew that it was for different industries. Normal industries were not allowed, but restaurants were not. 300,000 silver. Zhao Ying shook her head. Those bastards deserve to die. Needless to say, these silvers were obtained from robberies. How many people did they rob? And how many people died in vain under their blades? The Raging Tiger Troop always killed people directly when they robbed, leaving no way out. That was why their evil deeds had not been exposed, and they had been able to live freely until now. Using the money to build a place for them to live is the right way. Okay, let's try it. Leave it to me. All right. What is your martial arts level now? Innate mastery. I thought I couldn't cultivate inner energy without foundation. Chuli smiled. Did you have some kind of adventure? Sort of. What adventure? Zhao Ying's eyes lit up and asked excitedly. Chuli shook his head. Nothing much. I just ate a fruit, and that's it. What fruit? I don't know. Maybe it's the transformation fruit. Zhao Ying tilted her head and asked curiously, could it be that this fruit can help you build your foundation? Chuli smiled. You'll know when you read some books. Brother, you're too lucky. Chuli shook his head. If I was lucky, I wouldn't have missed the opportunity to build my foundation and wouldn't have to suffer so much. That's true. Zhao Ying nodded. She had seen Chuli's predicament with her own eyes. Because he couldn't cultivate without foundation, he had suffered too much. He had been mocked and humiliated by others. When did you eat the transformation fruit? Chuli shook his head and changed the topic. The metamorphosis fruit can only make up for the foundation building. Innate mastery still has to be cultivated by oneself. It can't be achieved overnight. In this world, there is no miraculous medicine that can allow one to reach innate mastery just by eating it. Innate, Zhao Ying sighed. When she thought of the congenital realm, she felt as if she was standing at the foot of a towering mountain that pierced through the clouds. She was filled with fear and didn't have the confidence to climb over it. Chuli smiled and said, your foundation is very solid. It won't be a problem. Yes. Zhao Ying nodded vigorously to encourage herself. Senior Marshal Brother had given him a lot of tendon-clearing pills. His meridians were much stronger than ordinary people, and he had a huge advantage over others. He would definitely be able to enter the Xiantian realm. The two of them used their light body technique, and their speed was not any slower than riding a horse. After running for half a day, Zhao Ying's inner energy was depleted. Chuli placed his hand on her back and channeled an endless stream of inner energy into her. She could feel the purity and depth of Chuli's inner energy. Out of curiosity, she asked him what heart technique he was cultivating. When she heard that it was the Infinite Azure Sea, she was shocked. The Infinite Azure Sea was very famous, but very few people cultivated it. It was because she was very curious about it. She heard that it was extremely powerful and that it could be used to defeat the masters of the same generation. However, cultivating it was like drinking poison to quench thirst. It was no different from suicide. Senior Marshal Brother, the Infinite Azure Sea is very dangerous. I know. Then why are you cultivating it? Oh, I understand now. The tendon-clearing grass. She slapped her forehead and suddenly understood. The tendon-clearing grass made the meridians extraordinarily tough and could withstand the overlaying of inner energy. It could also reduce the harm caused by the Infinite Azure Sea. Chuli smiled. No wonder. She also understood why Chuli was so powerful and invincible. The power of the Infinite Azure Sea was not just for show. The two of them rushed back to the public house in one breath. After entering the public house, they went their separate ways. Zhao Ying went to the martial arts hall to submit her mission, while Chuli went back to the East Garden to recuperate. In the evening, Chuli went to the Moonlight Orchid Garden after dinner. The Moonlight Orchid emitted a warm glow, like a crescent moon. It was beautiful. Without the nourishment of his spiritual energy, the nightmare flower grew very slowly. It bloomed tonight. The Moonlight Orchid, on the other hand, was growing very well. There were already 3 seedlings. Li had done a good job. Light footsteps could be heard, bringing with it a faint fragrance. Chuli turned his head and saw Suru in an apricot gown walking towards him. She was beautiful. She waved her hand, indicating that Chuli did not need to be so polite. She sat opposite him. Well done. Chuli sat down and poured her a cup of tea. Did you receive it? Yes. Suru took the cup and took a sip. She smiled. Liyu's tea is really good. It's quite interesting. Lady Xiao is very satisfied. Chuli smiled. Was the journey smooth? Suru looked at him with a faint smile. Was the protector competent? Chuli closed fists, saluted, and smiled. Thank you, Chief. Suru waved her hand. Don't thank me. I've given you a chance. Whether you can grasp it or not depends on yourself. That was a close call. We encountered the Raging Tiger Troop. The Raging Tiger Troop. I've heard of them. Chuli shook his head and sighed. Does the public house know about the Raging Tiger Troop's actions? Suru saw that his expression was not right. She frowned. Did they offend you? It's fine if they offended me, but they... Chuli scoffed and told her everything they had done. Suru pursed her lips and stared at him with a gloomy face. The air around them seemed to have frozen. She was also an innate master. Her aura was extraordinary. She was able to combine her acquired environment with her cultivation level to form a tangible force. Damn it, Suru said coldly. The patrol of the public house should die. Chuli shook his head. This incident was originally the responsibility of the public house, but they robbed and killed. No one reported it. If the public house turned a blind eye to it, there's really no way to get involved. No matter which dynasty or which court, the bureaucrats were all the same. They would not take the initiative to solve problems. Suru scoffed. This is the responsibility of the patrol. These people did not do anything. I will report this to Lady Xiao. She will investigate this thoroughly. The Raging Tiger Troop has been destroyed. Chuli shook his head and told her what he had done. Suru's eyes widened in disbelief. Chuli shrugged. There are only a few pitiful women left in the Raging Tiger Troop. Lady Xiao can send someone to take a look. Suru frowned and pondered for a moment. She thought about it from beginning to end. She asked, The Raging Tiger Troop has an innate master, right? Chuli nodded and told her about his adventure. It was the same as what he had told Zhaoing. So you're an innate master now? Yes. Then do you want to challenge the ranking tower? I don't want to be a protector. Being a scribe is good. Being a scribe is good. Interesting. Suru pursed her lips and smiled. There aren't many people as smart as you. They're all attracted by the high salary of being a protector. Chuli said, These women are pitiful. I want to open a restaurant in town so they can support themselves. The Raging Tiger Troop has a lot of money. He did not hide his gains. A place like the Raging Tiger Troop must have a lot of money. It would not be nice to hide it. The rule of the public house was that they could keep what they earned. Opening a restaurant. Suru frowned and shook her head. It's not that easy, but your idea is good. They should support themselves so they don't have to think about it all day long. As a woman, she liked Chu Li's way of doing things. The key to a restaurant is the taste. If the food is not good, they can't do anything. Suru thought about it and said, We need to find a way to poach a few chefs from the fairy's capital. Yes. All right, leave it to me. I'll help you this once for their sake. Thank you, Chief. Chuli closed fists, saluted. He pondered for a while and said, Destroying the Raging Tiger Troop this time was like poking a hornet's nest. Good job. Suru scoffed. What hornet's nest? Chuli shook his head. The leader of the Raging Tiger Troop knows the sentient menace. What? Suru was stunned. Her expression changed. The sentient menace? Chuli nodded slowly. The Tempest Temple. This is really troublesome. Suru stood up. This won't do. I have to report this to Lady Xiao immediately. There are no survivors. I don't think it will spread out. The four major sects have a long history. Their secret techniques are endless. It's impossible to guard against them. Suru turned her slim waist and floated away. She waved her hand at him with her back facing him. Chuli shook his head and sighed. This was really troublesome. The Tempest Temple would not sit idly by if that person had the secret manual of the sentient menace. He came to the shore and stood under the willow tree in deep thought. The moonlight reflected on the surface of the lake. The sparkling waves shone on his calm face. The Tempest Temple was not an ordinary faction. According to the books he read and the information he obtained, the public house was not as strong as the Tempest Temple. After a while, Xiaoqi and Suru arrived. They stood side by side at the bow of the boat. Xiaoqi's clothes were as white as snow. She looked like an otherworldly fairy. The moonlight reflected on her face. Her eyes were like stars, shining brightly. The two of them floated in front of him with a faint fragrance. "My lady," Chuli closed fist saluted. Xiaoqi waved her hand and said, "The Tempest Temple." Chuli said, "Actually, that person has the secret manual of the sentient menace." Suru turned to look at Xiaoqi. "My lady, this is bad." Xiaoqi frowned and looked at Chuli. "You found it?" Chuli nodded. Suru was not happy at all. She stomped her feet. "This is troublesome." Xiaoqi frowned. "What do you think?" Chuli said, "I think I can cultivate it." Suru rolled her eyes at him. "Stop dreaming. If it's that easy, the martial arts of the Tempest Temple would have been spread all over the world." Xiaoqi waved her hand. "That's not necessarily true. There are many secret manuals of the Tempest Temple, but no one has been able to cultivate it." Chuli frowned. "It doesn't seem that difficult, does it?" After reading the secret manual, he felt that it did not take much effort to cultivate it. His progress was also very fast. The more powerful the martial arts of the Tempest Temple, the more profound the dermic base is required. Without enough dermic base, it's impossible to cultivate it. Xiaoqi said, "The monks of the Tempest Temple are also divided into civil and martial arts. Once you enter the temple, you must first learn dermic base for 10 years and cultivate along with the foundation. Only when you have enough dermic base can you cultivate martial arts to protect the temple and subdue demons. Without enough dermic base, you are not allowed to cultivate martial arts. So they are not afraid of martial arts being spread around. The secret manual of the sentient menace is not hard to find, but no one dares to cultivate it." Xiaoqi shook her head. "That's why there is no one in the library or the martial arts hall." "Why?" Suru asked curiously. Xiaoqi said, "Once you cultivate the sentient menace, you will go astray. Some people suspected that there was a problem with the secret manual, but later it was found out that it was not the secret manual, but the dermic base." Suru asked curiously, "What's going on?" "The martial arts of the Tempest Temple have demonic characteristics. It needs dermic base to dissipate. Without dermic base, cultivating the martial arts of the Tempest Temple is no different from suicide." Suru quickly said, "Chuli, don't do anything stupid." She looked at Chuli worriedly. The sentient menace was famous, and it was the top martial arts of the Tempest Temple. It was extremely powerful, and no one could resist this temptation. Chuli had already cultivated it. It would be difficult for him to stop. Chuli smiled. Xiaoqi looked at him strangely. Chuli smiled. "Yes, Lady Xiao, my dermic base is not bad." Suru clapped her hands and suddenly realized, "Hey." Chapter 27. Of course, she knew Chu Li's identity and background. He grew up in the Temple of Autumn and had been cultivating the Dharma since he was young. His Dharma was profound, and he was the best in the temple. Although the Tempest Temple's dermic base was profound and far superior to other temples, people like Chu Li, who had been influenced by the dermic base since he was young and had extraordinary comprehension, might not necessarily be inferior to the disciples of the Tempest Temple. Xiaoqi muttered, "The Tempest Temple's martial arts relies on the dermic base to cultivate. The deeper the dermic base, the faster the cultivation will be and the safer it will be. However, the Tempest Temple's martial arts are indeed dangerous. If you feel that you can't control your killing intent, stop immediately." Chuli nodded and smiled. "I'll be careful. I want to try it out first." "There's no hurry." Xiaoqi waved her hand and said, "The sentient menace is very difficult to cultivate. You don't have the foundation of the Tempest Temple's martial arts, so your progress will be very slow." Chu Li raised his eyebrows. Suru smiled and said, "If you can master it, it will be amazing." Xiaoqi glanced at her. Suru quickly smiled and said, "Of course, it's also very troublesome. If the Tempest Temple finds out about this, they will definitely come looking for trouble. They will cripple my martial arts? Of course. Isn't that too domineering? They're so overbearing. Who would dare to oppose them? The other three sects are no match for them. I understand. Chuli nodded slowly. I will use them carefully. Does the public house not have any plans to deal with them? It's not worth the effort. Su-Ru waved her hand and said, they're not in our territory anyway. Let's just let the Zhong public house have a headache. Chuli frowned. Can the Zhong public house handle it? He did not quite believe it. The public house was definitely weak in front of the Tempest Temple. Otherwise, they would have destroyed the Tempest Temple a long time ago. No matter how strong the Zhong public house was, they would not be able to fight against them. Let's try to restrain each other. Sura looked at Xiaoqi. Anyway, the Tempest Temple won't dare to turn against the High Duke's public house. There's still the Imperial Court. No matter how strong the Tempest Temple was, it was impossible for them to completely fall out with the Imperial Court. Otherwise, it would be a Pyrrhic victory even if they could win. The other three sects would definitely not let go of the chance to kick them when they were down. Miss, what other martial arts do we have from the Tempest Temple? Chuli, have you thought it through? Do you really want to cultivate? Xiaoqi asked. Chuli nodded slowly. I would like to experience the intricacies of the Tempest Temple's martial arts. All right. Xiaoqi nodded. Follow me. The three of them boarded the boat and floated to the Jade Guardian Island. The Jade Guardian Island was brightly lit as if it was daytime. Under the illumination of the lights, the richly ornamented pavilions looked like immortal palaces. The three of them arrived at the stargazing tower. Xiaoqi personally opened a cabinet and took out a square box. After opening it, she took out a golden booklet and handed it to Chuli. This is the basic heart technique of the Tempest Temple. Chuli took it. The material was neither paper nor silk, and it felt strange to the touch. The words Mahavairocana's demon subduing scripture were written on it. Chuli frowned and flipped it open. It was a Buddhist scripture. This is the entry-level heart technique of the Great Laying Temple. It is also the core heart technique of the temple. It can suppress all inner demons. Xiaoqi shook her head. As long as you can touch the first level, you'll be able to cultivate the Tempest Temple's martial arts. Disciples who are not initiated cannot cultivate martial arts. I see. After Chu Li flipped through it, he immediately imprinted it into the omniscient mirror and analyzed it through it. The power of Buddhist scriptures was unpredictable. Some were the profound meaning of the scripture, and once one understood its meaning, one's state of mind would be improved. Some were like mantras, and when recited, one would be connected to the bodhisattva or arhat and receive blessings. Some required one to visualize and cultivate and dig out one's own treasure. It's useless. Xiaoqi continued. Rumor has it that the cultivation of Mahavairocana's demon subduing scripture requires enlightenment, and it's not spread to anyone else. That's why they are fearless and not afraid that it will be spread to outsiders. Whoever cultivates it will die. Chu Li slowly nodded. Enlightenment could not be secretly learned. Not everyone could do it, and it would be useless if one's cultivation level was not high enough. There were probably not many people in the Tempest Temple who could do it, and they would not leave the temple. Therefore, outsiders would not be able to touch the profound meaning of the Tempest Temple's martial arts. Lady Xiao, are you trying to make me give up? Chu Li handed the booklet back. Xiaoqi said, I know you're a smart person. You always want to break the rules and do what others can't. Chu Li smiled. Xiaoqi said, but you still have to be careful. The sentient menace is not easy to cultivate. All right, I'll give it a try. If it doesn't work, I'll give up, Chu Li said. Xiaoqi nodded. That's for the best. She did all this to convince Chu Li and dispel his desire to win. Otherwise, if he really wanted to cultivate the sentient menace, it would very likely destroy him. Any smart person would be extremely confident. No matter what Chu Li said, Chu Li would not listen. Only when he personally experienced despair would he give up. Letting him read the scripture of Mahavairocana was to plant a seed in his heart. Without the scripture of Mahavairocana, he would not be able to cultivate the sentient menace. Cultivating it was just a tentative attempt, and there was no need to force it. It would eliminate his desire to win and avoid danger. Su-Ru, Xiaoqi said. Yes, Suru responded. She went to the cabinet and took out a small jade bottle. It was the size of a thumb, and it was crystal white. She handed the jade bottle to Chu Li. Chu Li, this is the seed of the Andromeda. See if you can grow it. Andromeda? Chu Li searched in his mind and quickly found it. He was surprised. Do you really want to grow it? Yes, I need it for cultivation, Xiaoqi said. Chu Li frowned and looked at her. Xiaoqi said, Don't worry, I know its harm. Chu Li slowly nodded. The Andromeda was extraordinarily beautiful, but it could cause people to hallucinate. If someone came in contact with its juice, they would have suicidal tendencies. Many people did not recognize it and only thought it was beautiful. They would bring it to the garden and eventually die under its flower. Suru rolled her eyes at him and scoffed. Are you really? Gather? Meow? 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 Fine model? Startled to send peck, eat, baron duty trade, falcon stand, handsome Chu Li smiled. I'll try. Try. Suru said impatiently. This flower is very important. Chu Li looked at Xiaoqi and smiled. Yes, I will definitely grow it. That's more like it. Suru scoffed. Xiaoqi said, The heart technique I cultivate is different from the normal heart technique. I need this flower to train my mind. Chu Li nodded. Yes, Lady Xiao. Don't worry, I will grow it as soon as possible. Okay. Xiaoqi nodded. You don't have to worry about the raging tiger troop. I will take care of it. Thank you, Lady Xiao. Chu Li closed fists, saluted, and left. The wind from the lake at night was particularly moist. It gently lifted the hem of Suru's clothes. She stood by the shore and quietly looked at the vast lake in the distance. Chu Li, you must keep the Andromeda a secret and plant it as soon as possible. Chu Li nodded. Lady Xiao needs it that much. It is the key to cultivation. Suru turned her head and looked at him with her bright eyes. If you have the Andromeda, Lady Xiao's cultivation will improve and you will have a better life. I will try my best. Chu Li nodded. Suru tilted her head and looked at him. Aren't you curious about the heart technique that Lady Xiao is cultivating? Chu Li shook his head. I am not curious. You know your place. Suru smiled. Lady Xiao's martial arts were passed down from the madam. The madam came from Green Deer Cliff. Chu Li was surprised. He really did not know about this secret. Green Deer Cliff. Green Deer Cliff was one of the 4 major sects in the world. It was a super sect that had existed for thousands of years. It was unimaginably deep. He did not expect Lady Xiao's mother to come from Green Deer Cliff. The madam passed away early. She only left a sword scripture for Lady Xiao. It is not the martial arts of Green Deer Cliff. Suru shook her head. I don't know what the madam was thinking. She could have passed the martial arts of Green Deer Cliff to Lady Xiao. Maybe there are rules. Chu Li said. Suru rolled her eyes at him. This sword scripture was obtained by the madam by chance. No one has cultivated it before. Without the experience of predecessors, Lady Xiao explored it alone. Her progress is slow, but because it was passed down by the madam, she has to cultivate it. Lady Xiao has been an innate master for a long time. Her progress is not slow. Chu Li said. Suru scoffed. If it was not for this sword scripture, with Lady Xiao's exceptional talent, she would have become a grandmaster. Chu Li smiled. Suru rolled her eyes at him. Why? You don't believe me? I could do it. You don't mean it. Suru scoffed. Lady Xiao has an eidetic memory. She can master any martial arts with just one practice. If it was not for this sword scripture, forget it. Chu Li raised his eyebrows and nodded. He had used the omniscient mirror on Xiaoqi. Her spiritual force was strong. Suru was not lying. One of the key factors to become a grandmaster was spiritual force. Only when one's spiritual force was strong enough would he be qualified to break through to the grandmaster's boundary. The heart technique that Xiaoqi cultivated was very strange. It was similar to the Buddhist mind reading. Obviously, this sword scripture was not ordinary. The madam must have seen the beauty of it by letting Lady Xiao cultivate it. Other martial arts, even if one cultivated it to the enlightened mastery's boundary, would not be able to achieve the mind reading. A woman who could see through people's hearts had endless benefits. It was more useful than pure martial arts. It was no wonder that the madam chose it this way. Chu Li also knew that although the Andromeda was powerful, it also had its advantages. It could enhance one's spiritual force. He thought it was lost, but he did not expect to see it again. Are you really going to build a restaurant? Yes. I will hire 2 chefs first. Then, I will build a shop. Let's try it out first. If it is really good, it won't be too late to build a restaurant. Thank you, Chief. Consider the money for the shop as your reward. I have money here. You should keep that money for yourself. It's settled. Then I will have to trouble Chief to spend. I won't be spending Lady Zhao's money anyway. Don't worry. Suru smiled and patted his shoulder. The deity's beard was not cheap, and the military was not short of money. This time, not only would she not lose money, she would also earn a lot. After Chu Li returned to the East Garden, he did not rest. He immediately began to plant the Andromeda. The seeds of the Andromeda were hard to find, and it was not easy to grow. However, he understood that the most important thing was to keep it a secret. So, he opened a separate flower garden in an inconspicuous place where outsiders would not come. The Andromeda grew slowly. Chu Li moved the spiritual force of other flowers over to help it grow. Under the accelerated growth, it only took 10 days to grow a flower. The small yellow flower was dazzling and flawless. It made people want to hold it in their hands. In the middle of the night, Xiao Qi and Su Ru arrived. Liu had already returned to his room to sleep. Chu Li had been staying in the Moonlight Orchid parterre for the past 10 days, taking care of the Moonlight Orchid and the Nightmare Flower. Liu was not surprised. With Chu Li guarding him, he could sleep peacefully. Xiao Qi and Su Ru silently came over. Xiao Qi was dressed in white, while Su Ru was still in her apricot gown. The two of them stood beside Chu Li in front of the Andromeda, looking at the 5 bright yellow flowers. Who would have thought that such beautiful flowers would have the name Andromeda? Lady Xiao, how is it? Chu Li turned and asked. Xiao Qi nodded. It's the Andromeda. How'd you do it? Chu Li smiled without saying a word. Suru rolled her eyes at him and scoffed. So mysterious. No one found out, right? Of course. Chu Li nodded. Suru scoffed. At least you understand. Lady Xiao, should we pluck them? Yes. Xiao Qi nodded. She was cold and calm as usual. It was as if nothing in the world could make her lose her composure. She was as calm as the water in an ancient well. Chu Li knew that this was because of her temperament and the sword scripture. The sword scripture would probably suppress her emotions and keep her calm. Su Ru took the jade box and kept the 5 yellow flowers. She looked at Chu Li. Don't let them bloom yet. Let's wait and see if Lady Xiao still needs them. Chu Li nodded. Xiao Qi said, Chu Li, you have to think about the spirit field. Chu Li quickly said, Lady Xiao, I've thought about it. The spirit field should be built on the Jade Guardian Island. Xiao Qi looked at him quietly with her bright eyes. It's too obvious, and there's not enough protection. The spirit field was a huge piece of meat. No one could resist it. If the protection was not enough, there would be people who would take the risk. At that time, the East Garden would become a dangerous place. She would be fine, but Liu would be in danger. Chapter 28. Xiao Qi looked at him and said, You've cultivated the sentient menace, haven't you? Chu Li nodded. I've tried. How's it going? It's all right. Chu Li had been cultivating for 10 days. The sentient menace was indeed powerful. It formed a strange, vital energy that did not circulate in the meridians, but instead accumulated in the muscles and bones. When he cultivated the sentient menace, the vital energy in his muscles would circulate and form a layer of invisible membrane that was extremely tough. The sentient menace had 6 stages: skin, flesh, tendons, meridians, bones, and marrow. Chu Li was currently at the first stage. His skin was covered with a layer of gas that was as tough as crocodile skin. It could deflect attacks, and normal swords would not be able to break it. Nope, backlash. Xiao Qi stared at him. Chu Li said, It's a little inappropriate. After cultivating the sentient menace, his heart would occasionally surge with restlessness. In this state, everything he saw was an eyesore, and he had the urge to destroy everything. Killing people was the most satisfying thing to do. Fortunately, He was well versed in Buddhism. When the killing intent rose, he would silently chant the Buddhist scriptures to suppress it. If he really could not control it, he would use the omniscient mirror. If he did not have the omniscient mirror, he would not dare to cultivate it. Without the omniscient mirror, he would definitely become a murderous demon if he continued to cultivate. He had a feeling that the leader of the Raging Tiger Troop had become like that because he was cultivating the sentient menace. If it's really inappropriate, then stop. I'll be careful. If it really doesn't work, then stop. You know what you're doing. Xiaoqi gave him a warning look. Chu Li quickly nodded. Let's go. Suru waved her hand. The two of them fluttered away, bringing with them a faint fragrance. Chu Li let out a sigh of relief. Looking at their beautiful backs, he felt melancholy. If such beauties did not belong to him, how unfortunate would his life be? The next morning, he woke up to start cultivating the delusion split. Liu was already practicing his fist technique. The courtyard was bustling with noise. Suddenly, the sound of a jade chime could be heard. Liu stopped. I'll go take a look. Chu Li's sword force was endless. He nodded and continued to swing his sword weakly. Liu took big strides as he ran out. After a while, a loud laugh could be heard. Brother, look who's here. Chu Li's omniscient mirror had already seen Zhao Ying. Her late green gown fluttered in the wind. She had a graceful figure and a face as white as jade. She gracefully stepped into the courtyard and pursed her lips into a smile. Senior Marshal Brother Chu. Junior Sister. Chu Li did not stop his attack. He smiled and said, Come, let's learn from each other. Sure. Zhao Ying unsheathed her sword and gracefully leaped in front of him. She thrust her sword forward gracefully, like a swallow flying across the surface of a lake. Liu gasped in admiration, his eyes wide and unblinking. Chu Li's sword was still moving at a leisurely pace. He pointed to the left and pointed to the right. Zhao Ying kept changing her moves. Her elegant sword force became fragmented. After more than 20 moves, she retreated and glared at him. Brother, you've gone too far. Chu Li sheathed his sword and shook his head. Your swordsmanship hasn't improved much. I've been practicing. Zhao Ying sheathed her sword and said with a smile, Senior, I'm already a rank 7 protector. You didn't attempt rank 6? I'll try rank 6 when I'm an innate master. That's true. Rank 7 protector? Liu asked in shock. Zhao Ying turned her head and smiled. Senior Marshal Brotherly, don't I look like one? Wow, Zhuo Feiyong is only rank 7. Liu exclaimed. Another genius. You two entered the public house together, right? Yes. Zhao Ying nodded. I'm with Senior Marshal Brother Chu and Senior Marshal Brother Zhua. Rank 7, huh? Liu shook his head and sighed. They really don't let others live. Zhao Ying smiled. If Senior Marshal Brother Chu were to attempt it, he would definitely be able to pass rank 6. Liu looked at Chu Li and laughed. His swordsmanship is amazing, but he's afraid of hidden weapons. What a pity, Chu Li said. Let's go to the garden and admire the flowers. All right. Zhao Ying clapped her hands. Liu quickly asked, Zhao Ying, you haven't had breakfast, right? Nope. Great. Let's eat together. What do you want to eat? I'm fine. I'll eat whatever you guys eat. Leave it to me. Chu Li and Zhao Ying left the courtyard and strolled along the flower bed on the island. Senior Marshal Brother, does Lady Xiao know about the Raging Tiger Troop? Yes, the chief will help. That's good. Zhao Ying let out a sigh of relief and shook her head. I've asked around. It's very difficult to open a restaurant. You need to build a tall building first. There are 4 restaurants in the town. 3 of them belong to the governor's public house, and one of them has a powerful background. To compete with them, it's going to be very difficult. Chu Li nodded. Zhao Ying said, It takes at least a year to build a tall building. It's very costly. Once the building is built, we'll need a good chef. All the good chefs in Chongming town are taken. We can't just take them away from the public house, right? The chief will hire a chef from the fairy's capital. As for the building, there's no rush. We'll take it slow. We'll first buy a shop and open a pub to practice. That's great. The two walked side by side, their shoulders touching from time to time. Chu Li said, Sister, you're almost perfecting the acquired level, right? Yes, I'll be there in half a month. Zhao Ying said, "Brother, I realize that cultivating in the public house is not as fast as cultivating in the ravine. It's quiet there. The environment is good too. It's too bad we can't go back to cultivate. It'd be great if we could isolate ourselves there. It's better not to go. All right, I want to go back to the Raging Tiger Troop to see if anyone would come looking for them. They don't even have the power to protect themselves. I'm worried. Let's go check it out in a few days." Zhao Ying smiled. "That's settled then. I'll go back and isolate myself to cultivate. Once I've perfected the acquired level, we'll leave." Chu Li smiled and nodded. The two of them walked around the small island. Zhao Ying's horizons were broadened, and she clicked her tongue in admiration. Every single flower here was so beautiful that it was simply irresistible. Liu shouted from afar, "It's time to eat." The two returned to the courtyard. The stone table was already filled with dishes. The aroma of food filled their noses. Zhao Ying smiled and thanked them. Liu puffed out his chest and proudly introduced the dishes to them. They sat down and started eating. Just as they were enjoying their meal, the sound of a jade chime could be heard. Liu put down his bowl and chopsticks and said helplessly, "I'll go take a look." Chu Li frowned. It was Zhuo Feiyang. Liu quickly brought Zhuo Feiyang back to the courtyard. Zhuo Feiyang was dressed in a sapphire blue gown. His face was like jade and his eyes were like stars. As soon as he entered the courtyard, his face darkened. He looked at Zhao Ying angrily and then at Chu Li. He laughed coldly. The two of them were eating together. They looked like a couple. "Brother Zhuo." Zhao Ying quickly stood up. "Why are you here? Did I come at the wrong time?" Zhuo Feiyang's face was cold. "I'm sorry to have disturbed you." Chu Li put down his bowl. "Zhuo Feiyang, what a rare guest." Zhuo Feiyang waved his hand. "If it weren't for Zhao Ying, I wouldn't have entered your doghouse. You're not welcome here," Chu Li said coldly. "Please, Zhao Ying, why are you eating with this guy?" Zhuo Feiyang did not look at Chu Li. He turned to Zhao Ying and said seriously, "It's better to stay away from people like him. Let's go." "Brother Zhuo." Zhao Ying frowned and said unhappily, "Don't be like this." Zhuo Feiyang said, "I haven't had breakfast either. Let's go to the Sky Inn." "I'm almost full," Zhao Ying said. "You should try it too. Brother Li's cooking is amazing. All he can do is cook. All he does is run around the kitchen and do things that women do." Zhuo Feiyang curled his lips and looked at Liu with disdain. "Useless." Liu gritted his teeth and clenched his fist. In the end, he did not throw a punch. He had no chance of winning against a genius like Zhuo Feiyang. "Brother Li, don't listen to his barking." Chu Li patted Liu's shoulder and turned his head. "Zhuo Feiyang, you're really arrogant. You're in our territory, and you still dare to be so presumptuous." "Brother." Zhao Ying quickly waved her hand. "Forget it. I'll leave first." "All right, then I won't keep you." Chu Li looked at her and shook his head. Zhao Ying knew Chu Li's martial arts. If he really did beat Zhuo Feiyang into a cripple, Zhuo Feiyang would not care. After all, this was the East Garden. Trespassing without permission was a serious crime. No one would say anything even if he killed him. Although Zhuo Feiyang had crossed the line, he would not feel good if he was beaten into a cripple. Zhuo Feiyang laughed coldly. "What do you do to me?" Chu Li chuckled. Zhao Ying quickly pulled Zhuo Feiyang up. "Brother Zhuo, let's go." Zhuo Feiyang tried to break free, but found that he could not. He was dragged out of the courtyard and soon reached the shore. Bai Jijia was waiting on a boat. When he saw them, Bai Jijia let out a sigh of relief. He quickly moved the boat closer and let the two of them board. Zhuo Feiyang stood at the bow of the boat and looked at Zhao Ying with surprise. "Sister Zhao, when did your inner energy become so strong?" "It's even stronger than mine." Zhao Ying smiled. "Of course not. Sister Zhao, ever since you came back from the mission, you've changed." Zhuo Feiyang shook his head and sighed. Zhao Ying smiled awkwardly and did not reply. Zhuo Feiyang asked sincerely, "Sister, did I do something wrong that made you angry?" "No." Zhao Ying shook her head. "Then why?" Zhuo Feiyang stared at her beautiful face. "Why are you so cold?" "Brother Zhuo, I've always been like this. You're overthinking it." Zhao Ying shook her head and avoided his gaze. Zhuo Feiyang stared at her. "Sister Zhao, who did you do the mission with?" "It's a top-secret mission. I can't tell you." "Brother Zhuo, you know the rules." Zhao Ing shook her head. Zhou Feiyong furrowed his brows. You like someone else, don't you? Brother Zhuo, what are you talking about? Zhao Ing quickly waved her hand and said angrily, I don't like anyone. Also, Brother Zhuo, please don't misunderstand. We're just friends, not that kind of relationship. You. Zhou Feiyong's face turned red. He was furious. Zhao Ing said, because we're classmates, we're closer. But it's not what you think. Brother Zhuo, please don't misunderstand. You like someone else, Zhou Feiyong said coldly. Zhao Ing shook her head and sighed. There was no way he could explain it. She could only avoid his gaze and look into the distance. Zhou Feiyong furrowed his brows in deep thought. He planned to find out who she was doing the mission with. If he could not find out about the top secret mission, he could look into other aspects. For example, who was out during this period of time. He could then use the elimination method to search for clues. All right, then why did you go to that trash's place? Zhou Feiyong took a deep breath and scoffed. He's full of evil ideas. Sister Zhao, you're too naive. Don't be fooled by him. Brother Zhuo, Brother Chu isn't that bad. If he isn't bad, then who is? Zhou Feiyong laughed coldly. But it doesn't matter. So what if he's bad? He's just a piece of trash. There's no need to take him seriously. Zhao Ing used to think that when he called Chu Li a piece of trash, it was not a nice thing to hear. She did not think much of it. But now it was so harsh. She wanted to cover his mouth. Brother Zhuo, Brother Chu isn't that weak. It's just that his swordsmanship is slightly better. That won't change the fact that he's a piece of trash. When I become an innate master, I'll beat the crap out of him. I'll definitely cripple him. Brother Chu is now a rank 6 scribe. Zhao Ing scoffed. Rank 6? Zhou Feiyong was stunned. His expression suddenly changed. He's rank 6? You can go and check. Impossible. Zhou Feiyong furrowed his brows and shook his head. How is that possible? Rank 6 was an insurmountable barrier, especially for a scribe. Chu Li was so young. How could he become a rank 6? Brother Chu, do you remember the bet? Zhao Ing suddenly felt an inexplicable thrill of revenge. She smiled. Rank 6. You're rank 7 now. I'll go and challenge rank 6. Zhou Feiyong scoffed. Zhao Ing shook her head. Without becoming an innate master, there's no hope for rank 6. I can do it, Zhou Feiyong said angrily. Zhao Ing smiled, but did not say anything. Hey. Chapter 29. The sky was not bright yet. The moonlight was like water, shining on the porch window. The house was also dimly lit. Chu Li slowly practiced the sentient menace in the West Room. He did the 36 postures in sequence. His mind was calm, without any form or ego. Only when his mind was in this state would his movements be effective. If his mind was not calm, no matter how he practiced, it would be useless. He did not cultivate the sentient menace. After the 36 postures, a strange force flowed along with his movements. His skin was washed once, and finally, the force entered his skin and merged with it. Through the omniscient mirror, he saw that his skin was slightly changed by the force. It became tighter and more elastic. He felt like he had infinite strength, as if he could break the sky with one punch. He knew that it was an illusion, but the sentient menace did increase his strength. He had practiced it for about 10 days, and his strength had increased by half. It was shocking. He did not know what other miraculous things would happen in the future. While he was practicing, a faint golden light flowed on his skin. It was no different from the leader of the Raging Tiger Troop. Chu Li could tell that this guy had only scratched the surface of the sentient menace. The sentient menace was like casting pearls before swine. If he cultivated it well, Chu Li would not be able to do anything to him. With a huge increase in strength, his speed would naturally increase as well. Especially the explosive force, it was impossible to defend against. The leader of the Raging Tiger Troop could not defeat him, which was a disgrace to the sentient menace. Thinking about this, Chu Li was even more afraid of the Tempest Temple. With such a divine technique, he did not know how powerful it would be. With such a martial art, how scary would the Tempest Temple be? He was also secretly happy. The most important aspect of the sentient menace was the meditation technique. The deeper the meditation, the faster the strange force flowed. If the mind was shallow, the inner energy would be intermittent, and it would be almost impossible to cultivate. He had the omniscient mirror, and his meditation technique was very deep. Cultivating the technique was very smooth. He practiced from morning to night, and after eating, he immediately returned to the house to continue. He did not let you see him, in case he wanted to practice it secretly and cause endless harm. The light in the house was dim, and it was filled with a rose color. Just as he was about to leave the house, footsteps came from outside, accompanied by a faint fragrance. Suru stood at his window and looked in. "Chuli, come, accompany me to the town." "Yes." Chuli walked out of the west room. Both of them exited from the south gate of the mansion and went straight into Chongming town. As the sun set, the entire Chongming town was dyed a rosy color. Smoke rose from the chimneys, and the smell of burning firewood filled the air. It added a sense of life to the town. Chu Li could vividly feel the reality of this world. He was truly alive, and it was not just a dream. Suru was dressed in an apricot gown, strolling leisurely on the streets. "Let's see which shop is suitable. I'll choose today." Chuli raised his eyebrows. They were going to choose a shop for the restaurant today. The two of them walked around Chongming town. Chuli marked two shops that were not close to the street. They were on the other side of the main street and were deserted. He felt that this place was suitable. On one hand, it was quiet, and on the other hand, good wine needed no privacy. In this day and age, as long as the food was well cooked, there was no need to worry that no one would come to eat. After choosing the shop, night had fallen and the stars were twinkling in the sky. The two of them arrived at Sky Inn, the best restaurant in Chongming town. When the waiter downstairs saw Suru, he hurriedly came over and said, "Chief Steward Su, this lowly one greets you." "Chief Steward, please." Suru waved her hand and said, "Just give us a table on the second floor." "Yes, this lowly one will lead the way." The quick-witted waiter quickly nodded and brought the two of them to a table on the second floor. He looked at the few seats near the window and said in a low voice, "Chief, do you need me to free up 2 good seats for you?" "No need, this is it," Suru said. Their seats were quite far away from the window. The surrounding seats were filled with people, and it was a little noisy. Suru sat down without a change in expression. "Let's follow the old rules. Give him a jar of good wine and 6 signature dishes. Hurry up." "Yes, it's coming." The waiter quickly nodded. Chuli glanced at it and frowned. What a coincidence. The person at the opposite table looked up, and his face darkened. He then saw Suru and quickly stood up. "Zhua Feiyong greets Chief Steward Su." Bai Jijia, who was beside him, also gave a fist salute and bowed. Suru waved her hand and said, "No need to be so polite. We're all here to eat. Eat your food." "Yes." The two of them retreated and returned to their seats to continue eating. Suru looked at Chu Li and pursed her lips into a smile. Enemies always meet. What a coincidence, isn't it? He always comes here to eat. It's normal to bump into him, Chu Li said. Zhua Feiyong liked to enjoy life and was very good to himself. A protector's salary was generous, so he was not short of money. Moreover, his family was very well off, so he almost came to the Sky Inn for 3 meals a day. The Sky Inn was the best restaurant in the Chongming town. It was very expensive, so most people could not afford it. Suru shook her head and smiled. "Do you really want him to be a protector?" "No need." Chu Li shook his head. "He wants to kill me. Asking him to be a protector is like inviting a wolf into the house." "You finally understand." Suru nodded. "You can't be careless when it comes to protectors. Sometimes, you can lose your life if you're not careful." "All right, how's the progress with Zhaoing?" "It's all right. You didn't even grab such a good opportunity." Suru pursed her lips into a smile. "You've been alone for a month. A man and a woman alone together. Nothing happened?" "No." Chu Li shook his head. Suru rolled her eyes at him and scoffed. "Useless." Chu Li smiled bitterly. "Chief, Sister Zhao isn't that kind of person. Don't scare her." "You?" Suru shook her head and sighed. "You're too honest. You look like a smart person. How can you be so honest?" Chu Li smiled embarrassedly. "I've never interacted with a woman before. You get along well with us." Suru smiled. You're the first one who behaves so naturally in front of Lady Xiao. You don't lose your composure. Lady Xiao's face was stunning and beautiful. Her beauty was like a physical force. Men were naturally powerless against this kind of power. They would all be affected. No man would not lose his composure in front of Lady Xiao. Chu Li shook his head. I can let go of Lady Xiao and Chief because I know myself. I won't have any improper thoughts. But it's different for her. I see. Suru nodded. Zhao Ying won't look down on you, right? Of course not. Chu Li shook his head. Sai, next time, I'll try to let you two be together again when there's a mission. Suru smiled. The two of them were sitting next to Zhuo Feiyang. Although it was noisy, he could still hear their conversation. Chapter 30. Crack. The chopsticks in Zhuo Feiyang's hand broke into two. Bai Jijia was shocked and whispered, Master. Zhuo Feiyang's face darkened. He nodded and said, Let's go back. Master, are you full? Bai Jijia asked. He did not even touch the dishes on the table. It was a pity that the dishes were not cheap. Zhuo Feiyang stood up and came to Suru's side. He closed fists, saluted, and left. Suru waved her hand and gestured for them to leave. Zhuo Feiyang glared at Chu Li and left in big strides. Suru smiled as she watched Zhuo Feiyang and Bai Jijia leave. Chu Li sighed. Chief, you just want to see the world in chaos. Suru smiled. This is more interesting. Chu Li, if you still can't beat Zhuo Feiyang, then I'll really call you useless. Chief, things between men and women are not like other things. It's not that simple. You're overthinking it. All right, stop it. Get together. Stop it. Play tricks? Of course, Zhuo Feiyang is not a good partner. I won't let Zhao Ying jump into the fire pit. Zhuo Feiyang is arrogant and selfish. He only has himself in his eyes. He only has a good appearance. Whoever follows him will be unlucky. I'll buy these two shops tomorrow and start immediately. Thank you, Chief. Take care of this and prepare for the spirit field as soon as possible. This is a big deal. Okay. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. It was noon and the sun was shining brightly. The town was much quieter. The scorching sun made people want to stay in the shade. Chu Li asked Zhao Ying to check out the two shops. Both of them had inner energy to protect them, so they were not afraid of the heat. The two shops had been connected and the internal structure had been changed into a pub. They went in and looked around. Zhao Ying was very satisfied. It was big and spacious. After taking a look around, the two of them walked back, leisurely chatting as they strolled. They walked into a narrow alley and turned a corner. They saw a man in a green shirt standing in the middle of the bluestone path. His back was facing them, and he had a slender figure. Chu Li knew it was Zhuo Feiyang at first glance. Zhao Ying recognized him as well and frowned. For the past few days, Zhuo Feiyang had been pestering her. She had gone into seclusion and refused to see him. So she had been avoiding him. She did not expect him to follow her all the way here. Chu Li did not stop, so Zhao Ying had no choice but to follow. When they got closer, Zhuo Feiyang slowly turned around and glared at Zhao Ying. Zhao Ying was helpless. Senior brother Zhuo, Sister Zhao, you're in such a good mood. Zhuo Feiyang laughed coldly. Aren't you in isolation? I came out for some business. Senior brother Zhuo, were you waiting for me here? I wasn't waiting for you. Zhuo Feiyang turned and glared at Chu Li. I was waiting for you. Chu Li asked, Zhuo Feiyang, what is it? Surname Chu. You are a despicable person. Zhuo Feiyang pointed at him and scolded. You used Chief Su to transfer junior sister Zhao to be your protector. You're such a despicable person. Chu Li snapped. You're being unreasonable. You know you broke the rules, right? He was carrying out a top-secret mission. The so-called top-secret mission meant that the person executing the mission had to keep a secret. It cannot be leaked, and the other guards could not ask about it either. Zhuo Feiyang's actions were against the rules. If he pursued the matter, his punishment would not be light. Surname Chu, don't think that just because you're related to Chief Su, you're someone important. Zhuo Feiyang, that's enough. Tell me, what do you want? Zhuo Feiyang put down his finger and pouted. I'll deal with you sooner or later. Junior sister Zhao, let's go back. Senior brother Zhuo, what's the matter? Chu Li frowned. Zhuo Feiyang, I have serious business with junior sister Zhao. Don't cause trouble. Serious business? Umph. You're just using it to get close to junior sister Zhao. Zhua Feiyang laughed coldly. You think I don't know what you're thinking? Chu Li sighed. All right, junior sister Zhao is gentle and kind. Which man wouldn't like her? I'm the same. What? You're the only one allowed to pursue junior sister Zhao, but I'm not allowed. You're useless. You don't have a right. You can't even defeat a useless person like me. You don't have a right. I'll defeat you one day. Who can say for sure? You think you can become a master just because you're talented? You're too naive. There are plenty of talented people out there, but how many of them actually become masters? Zhua Feiyang, an arrogant idiot like you will die sooner or later. For junior sister Zhao's sake, you should stay away from her. Zhua Feiyang's eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. He gritted his teeth and laughed coldly. Junior sister Zhao won't have a good life if she stays with a useless piece of trash like you. I'm rank 6. I can take care of junior sister Zhao and give her a stable life. Can you? As a protector, you're always worried about your life. You don't even know if there'll be a tomorrow after today. Who knows if you'll lose your life in a mission tomorrow? You're letting junior sister Zhao live in fear every day? You. Zhua Feiyang was angry and frustrated. He should not have argued with Chu Li. He should not have used his weakness to attack Chu Li's strength. He scoffed. I'll soon become an innate master. When that time comes, Chu Li waved his hand. Then wait until you become an innate master. Everyone knows how to brag. It's not easy to become an innate master. Goodbye. He tugged at Zhao Ying's sleeve and walked away. Zhao Ying looked at Zhua Feiyang and then at him. She was in a difficult position. She did not want to be so heartless. She stomped her feet and shook off Chu Li's hand. I'm leaving first. She twisted her waist, turned around, and ran away. Chu Li stood where he was and shook his head. She was really kind. Even at this point, she could not bear to hurt Zhua Feiyang. Zhua Feiyang looked at her graceful figure and let out a sigh of relief. His face darkened. Chu Li, stay away from junior sister Zhao. Chu Li scoffed. Stay away from her. All right, you're no longer a match for junior sister Zhao. Do you know that? What a joke. Zhua Feiyang laughed coldly. Chu Li shook his head and said, You're still daydreaming all day long, thinking that you're a master. How pitiful. Zhua Feiyang, why don't you compete with sister Zhao Ying? When that time comes, you'll know how ridiculous you are. I will, Zhua Feiyang said coldly. Chu Li walked forward and got closer to him. If you can't beat junior sister Zhao, then you should just slit your own throat. It's too embarrassing. It's none of your business. Zhua Feiyang scoffed. How pitiful. Chu Li shook his head and walked past him. The veins on Zhua Feiyang's hands bulged like earthworms, but he held himself back. He would deal with him when he became an innate master. Revenge was a dish best served cold. Chu Li's steps were light as he walked along the greenstone path and passed through the alleyway. He smiled. He could foresee what Zhua Feiyang would do. He would spar with Zhao Ying and realize that he was no match for her. Then, he would isolate himself and train hard. That way, he could have some peace and quiet. Zhua Feiyang was a proud and arrogant chauvinist. If he could not match up to Zhao Ying, then he would never pursue her. He would only pursue her if he could defeat her. By then, Zhao Ying's heart would already belong to him. Chu Li's footsteps became lighter as he thought about this. Hey! Chapter 31. Zhua Feiyang's face was gloomy as he walked. Chu Li's words echoed in his mind. He recalled Zhao Ying's actions when they first met. His face grew darker, and he started to panic. Was he going to lose Zhao Ying? He could not help but recall the first time he met Zhao Ying. The second day, he entered the public house. He went to the lecture hall to report. According to the rules of the school, when he entered the lecture hall, he saw Zhao Ying among the 20 people. His eyes brightened and his heart started to race. The world suddenly became a better place. With that one look, he was certain that she was his woman. Zhao Ying was quiet in the lecture hall. She rarely spoke. She was a quiet and gentle woman, but as the only woman in the hall, everyone was paying attention to her. He shook his head. Chu Li, this useless piece of trash, also liked Zhao Ying. It was like a toad lusting after a swan's flesh. He thought it was ridiculous, but he did not let his guard down. This guy cannot practice martial arts, but he was very smart. Zhao was gentle, kind, and pure. What if she really fell for his flowery words? That was why he tried to attack Chu Li whenever he had a chance. But reality was cruel. Every time he attacked Chu Li, he would be rebuffed. Not once did it go smoothly. Instead, he embarrassed himself. He could only watch as Zhao got closer to Chu Li, this useless piece of trash, and he could not do anything about it. It was a terrible feeling. Could Chu Li really succeed? Was he really going to steal Zhao Ying's heart? He returned to his courtyard with a heavy heart. He tossed and turned all night and did not sleep well. The next morning, he arrived at the training field of the martial arts hall early in the morning. He saw Zhao Ying practicing her swordsmanship. The morning sun was bright and beautiful. It was neither hot nor cold. Zhao Ying was dressed in a light green gown. She looked graceful and valiant. Under the sunlight, it was as if her whole body was glowing. It was a fatal attraction. There were many people practicing around her. Zhuo Feiyang looked around coldly and said, "Zhao Ying." Zhao Ying did not stop practicing. She said casually, "Brother Zhuo, you're here." Zhuo Feiyang unsheathed his sword. "Sister Zhao Ying, let's spar." Zhao Ying hesitated and sheathed her sword. Spar. If this was before, she would have agreed without hesitation. But now, her swordsmanship was so strong that Zhuo Feiyang might not be her match. Zhuo Feiyang nodded. "My delusion split has made some progress recently. Let's spar. Watch my sword." As soon as he said that, he thrust his sword toward Zhao Ying. Zhao Ying had no choice but to draw her sword out. She drew a small arc in the air and parried Zhuo Feiyang's sword. In the beginning, Zhuo Feiyang was skeptical. He held back when he attacked, afraid that he would hurt her. But after a while, he saw that she was able to handle his attacks with ease. Her swordsmanship had improved tremendously, so he gradually increased his strength. In the end, he exerted all his skills and displayed the delusion-splitting sword art to the extreme, but he still couldn't do anything to Zhao Ying. She seemed to have held back to save him some face. This caused his face to darken unconsciously, and the momentum of his sword became even fiercer. Zhao Ying sensed that something was wrong, but she did not think too much about it. The flying swallow sword technique was light and graceful, and it was easy for her to deal with it. She felt more comfortable than before. Very soon, the two of them had exchanged over 100 blows. Zhuo Feiyang's sword aura was getting sharper and sharper, and he was getting more and more furious. He secretly activated his newly learned secret skill to stimulate his potential. His face turned red as if he was drunk, and his eyes were bloodshot. The gleam of his sword seemed to increase as well, and it was cold. He had not broken through to the innate mastery level, so his inner energy could not break out of his body. However, this kind of swordsmanship was rare in the martial arts field, so everyone stopped to watch. Zhao Ying's flying swallow sword technique was getting better and better. Against the fierce attacks, her movements became lighter and lighter. She was immersed in it, and a smile appeared on her face. When she sparred with Chu Li, he would often make her drop her sword within 2 moves. It was difficult for her to perform the flying swallow sword technique smoothly. When she fought with the masters of the Raging Tiger Troop, her heart was filled with murderous intent, so she could not relax and relax. The more relaxed the flying swallow sword technique was, the more powerful it was. It flashed brightly, and the power of the technique was shocking. Ding! Zhuo Feiyang froze. His sword suddenly flew out of his hand and fell to the ground with a clang. He turned around and walked away. His face was so dark that it could drip water. Zhao Ying then realized that something was wrong. She quickly called out, "Brother." Zhuo Feiyang walked away as if he did not hear her, and quickly jumped onto the boat. Bai Jijie was on standby on the boat. When he heard Zhuo Feiyang's cold order, he could only smile helplessly at Zhao Ying and paddle away. Zhao Ying stood on the shore and looked at Zhuo Feiyang's back helplessly. She sighed. Zhuo Feiyang was too narrow-minded. He lost to her and became angry. Could it be that what Chu Li said was true, that he looked down on women and could not stand a woman being stronger than him. When they were sparring, it was the same situation. He purposely let her win to make her happy. He did not feel embarrassed when he lost, so why couldn't he stand it now? She shook her head helplessly and turned around to continue her practice. The flying swallow sword technique was indeed exquisite. She was far from mastering it. In the following days, she isolated herself to train her inner energy. Occasionally, she would come to the martial arts field to practice her swordsmanship and adjust her mood. When she was in a good mood, she could cultivate her inner energy faster. Zhou Feiyang did not appear. He isolated himself. On the 10th day, Zhao Ying broke through the 36th acupuncture point and completed her acquired mastery. She went to look for Chu Li and prepared to go to the Raging Tiger Troop together. When she arrived at the East Garden, she knocked on the jade chime, but no one appeared. She could only leave in disappointment. They must have gone to the town to play. Chu Li stayed in the East Garden and did not socialize much. He did not interact much with his classmates either, because everyone looked down on him and laughed at him. When she thought of this, she felt a little pity for Chu Li. Senior brother Chu Li had suffered too much coldness and disdain. He had suffered too much. Chu Li and Li Yu were following a middleman around the town. They turned on both sides of the main street and finally arrived at a mansion near the river. The river flowed across Chongming town and was about 10 feet wide. The water was clear, and there were a few rows of willow trees by the river. The willow branches swayed in the wind like mist. Young masters, this is a 5-section mansion. It was originally owned by a wealthy merchant. Later on, this man met with disaster at sea. His family broke up, and the mansion is being sold. The middleman was a middle-aged man with an honest face. He shook his head helplessly. The world is unpredictable. It's like a dream or a dew. There's nothing we can do about it. Sigh, because the owner died, everyone thinks that there's something wrong with the feng shui of this mansion. Not many people want to buy it, so the price is not high. In today's world, martial arts were flourishing. Buddhism was also prevalent, suppressing Taoism. There were many believers of Buddhism. Chu Li nodded. This mansion was huge. Those who could afford it were not lacking in money. These people were usually very particular about this. No matter how much money they had, they could not win against the heavens. They were very respectful of fate. A mansion was related to its feng shui and luck. It was better to believe in it than not. Moreover, there were many mansions in the town. There was no need to buy this one. Tell me how much? Li Yu asked. I'll sell it for 10,000 taels. Chapter 32. Young masters, with this location and such a big house, 10,000 taels is really cheap. You can ask around for the value of the houses around here. If it's too expensive, I'll twist my head off. You bastard, why would we want her head? Li Yu glared at him. 10,000 taels, that's it then. Chu Li patted Li Yu's shoulder. He used the omniscient mirror to look around and was very satisfied with the layout of the house. The front hall, main courtyard, backyard, garden, everything was prepared. It was more than enough to house 100 people. Brother, isn't this a little too hasty? Li Yu's eyes widened. We haven't even looked inside yet. There's no need to look. Go get the contract. Chu Li smiled at the broker. It's best not to leave any loose ends. We usually stay in the public house and don't have much time. We don't want any trouble. Of course, of course. The middle-aged man nodded and smiled. He was shocked and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He had almost gotten into trouble. Can we move in today? The middle-aged man nodded and smiled. Of course, but it's been a while since we've lived here. It's best to clean it up. Yes, I know. Thank you. It's me who should thank you. I'll get it done right away. It'll be done in no time. Chu Li nodded. Send it to the public house after it's done. Tell them you're looking for Chu Li in the East Garden. Understood. As they walked back, Li Yu whispered to Chu Li, Brother, you bought such a big house. It's better to keep a low profile. Why send him to the public house? Chu Li shook his head. There's nothing I can't say to others. It's nothing. There's nothing wrong with being honest. But it depends on the situation. Now that you've ascended to rank 6, many people are jealous of you. They can't wait for you to make a mistake and drop your rank. What's wrong with that? People will ask, where did you get so much money? Rewards from the public house. People will ask, what did you do to earn so much money? And it's not up to them. Sigh. Anyway, it's too obvious. Don't worry, it'll be fine. I've already told Chief Sue about it. Chief Sue knows. Yes, that's good, that's good. Liu let out a sigh of relief. Just as the two of them returned to the public house, they coincidentally met the graceful Zhao Ying at the south gate. When Zhao Ying saw them, she quickly flew over like a swallow. Senior brother. She revealed a smile. Senior brotherly. Chuli looked at her and smiled. Congratulations, junior sister. Zhao Ying smiled sweetly and said, not bad, not bad. Let's set off as soon as possible. Yes, I'll leave today. Chuli nodded. Liu hurriedly asked for more details. Chuli had not told him about the raging tiger troop. Chuli said that he would talk about it when he got back. He and Zhao Ying went their separate ways to look for their horses. They met up at the south gate and rode their horses through Chongming town. Once they were out of the south gate, they galloped away. Because of the delay, it was already noon and the sun was high up in the sky. The two of them had inner energy to protect their bodies, so they did not feel too hot. The two horses had just started galloping and were full of energy. Senior brother, will they come when the tavern is finished? Let them choose. If they want to live a peaceful life, they can stay. If they want to be lively, they can come. I don't think the raging tiger bastion is safe. Yes, I've already bought a house. This time, I'll bring them over. Senior brother, you're so thoughtful. I hope everything goes well. As a person who had lived two lives, he understood that there were many things in this world that did not go according to one's will. Not everything could be done just because one wanted to. I've always been worried that someone would find out about the place. I can't even cultivate in peace. You've improved quite fast. Senior brother, why can't you tell that I know martial arts? She was curious about this. He had obviously reached the innate mastery's boundary, but he looked like he had never practiced martial arts. He did not have the aura and appearance of a martial arts master. Chuli did not look like a martial arts practitioner. His eyes were not sharp, and there was nothing strange about his temples. He looked like an ordinary person. It was very deceptive. If he said that he did not know martial arts, only those who knew him would believe him. Maybe it's because of the mortal transformation fruit. Chuli smiled. Usually, he only left a trace of inner energy in his dantian. It was a tiny bit to deal with sudden changes. All of his inner energy was hidden in the ground. With a single thought, his inner energy would surge. There was no surge of inner energy. Of course, there were no abnormalities. Outsiders would not be able to tell that he practiced martial arts. What a mortal transformation fruit, Zhao Ying exclaimed. Also, if you have such martial arts, why don't you challenge the ranking tower? It would be great to be a protector. Is being a protector good? Zhao Ying nodded. Of course. If I can come out to play, the pay is high. Chuli shook his head and smiled. Is being a protector not good? Zhao Ying asked in surprise. Chuli smiled. It's not that being a protector isn't good, but my ambition is not to be a protector. Then what is your ambition? Zhao Ying was even more curious. All the guards in the public house worked hard to be a protector and train. In this world where martial arts were flourishing, it was hard to do anything without martial arts. Everything was based on martial arts. Chuli did the opposite. He was obviously skilled in martial arts, but he did not want to be a protector. He was willing to be a small scribe. Chuli said, I think being a scribe is safer. Senior brother, you don't look like a coward. Zhao Ying tilted her head and looked at him. Chuli shook his head. I value my life. Zhao Ying stared at him curiously. Senior brother, you're brushing me off. There must be a reason. Everyone has their own ambition. I like a stable life. I can't be a protector. Chuli smiled. Is it that hard to understand? If you were 20 years older, I would believe you. You're so young, but you're saying this. Zhao Ying smiled and shook her head. Chuli waved his hand and smiled. I won't be a protector. That's too bad. I'm also rank 6 now. That's true. Zhao Ying nodded. A rank 6 scribe and a rank 6 protector were similar in status. The only difference was the salary. Chuli smiled and looked at her. What he pursued was different from others. He not only wanted martial arts, but he also wanted power. A man could not be powerless for even a day. He was tortured by power in his past life. As a researcher, his research funds were controlled by his superiors. It was like his testicles were being squeezed. It was a painful and torturous feeling. He had vowed countless times that he would become a government official. In this world, he left the temple for glory and wealth. He wanted to enjoy the wonderful taste of power. Martial arts was the most powerful force in this world, but power was even more powerful. With powerful martial arts, one could be free and unfettered. Having power was the most wonderful thing. Only then would he have lived his life in vain. As a protector, he could only pursue powerful martial arts. It was difficult for him to enter the ranks of the public house. So no matter what, he would not challenge the ranking tower. The two talked as they rode. The next afternoon, they arrived at the Raging Tiger Troop. When they saw the entrance of the cave, their faces changed. The huge rock was broken into pieces and scattered all over the ground. Chapter 33. Zhao Ying's face tightened as she frowned at the gravel. She looked at Chu Li worriedly. Brother, will they be in danger? Chu Li shook his head. He had already looked through the omniscient mirror. All 150 women were sitting in the main hall, chanting scriptures with their palms pressed together. He saw an old monk in a gray robe. He had a scar on his forehead. He was tall and strong, with a lion's nose and tiger's eyes. He was sitting in front of the women, chanting. Through the omniscient mirror, he saw that the old monk's meridians were glowing. He was an innate master, and his inner energy was profound. Is the master inside? Zhao Ying asked. Chu Li nodded. Zhao Ying frowned. He didn't harm them, did he? They're fine now. Come, let's go in. Chu Li stepped into the cave and entered the valley, arriving at the Raging Tiger Troop. The old monk suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze was like a sword, cold and threatening. He glanced at the women and glided out of the main hall. He came to the foot of the mountain and looked up at Chu Li. Chu Li stood halfway up the mountain and looked at him. He closed fist saluted. Who are you? Why are you here? I'm a monk. The old monk placed his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. He stared at Chu Li coldly. Why are you two here? Chu Li said, I'm a scribe from the public house. I happened to pass by here, and there were bandits running amok. I had to do justice and get rid of them, leaving these women alive. He knew the identity of this monk, so he used the name of the public house. The Raging Tiger Troop was destroyed by you? The monk's eyes flashed like lightning. Chu Li nodded. That's right. You're so young, and yet you have such martial arts. I'm impressed. The monk said slowly, I came here to persuade them to abandon evil and do good. It's a shame that they're already dead. I was too late. What a shame. Chu Li smiled. It's a pity that they don't have the fortune to enjoy it. Almsgiver, you should give them a chance to abandon evil and do good. You're wrong. Give them a chance, but did they give the people they killed a chance? They're so evil that even the heavens won't forgive them. Ba, the cycle of cause and effect, the 6 paths of reincarnation. Everything has a cause and effect. Monk, are you saying that those who die deserve to die? Then they're destined to die a violent death. As the saying goes, those who kill will always be killed. Zhao Ying snorted, Monk, please move aside. We want to see those sisters. The monk put his palms together and smiled. Ladies, you have devoted yourselves to Buddha and escaped from the sea of bitterness. Congratulations. I want to talk to them, Zhao Ying said. Please. The monk waved his robe and stepped aside. Chu Li and Zhao Ying glided down and passed by the monk. Chu Li looked relaxed, but he was secretly focused, ready to attack at any time. This old monk didn't come with good intentions. He was from the Great Thunderclap Monastery, the head of the world's 4 great sections. They were known as number 1 under the heavens, and no one dared to provoke them. Chu Li was very afraid of the Tempest Temple, even though he had moved out of the public house. The 3 of them fluttered to the main hall. 150 women were sitting on praying mats, chanting in low voices. It was a solemn scene. Zhao Ying subconsciously lightened her footsteps. Chu Li coughed softly, breaking the solemnity of the hall. The girls raised their heads and were overjoyed. Zhao Ying smiled and waved at them. Sisters, I'm here to pick you up. A slightly older girl stood up. Sister Zhao, where are we going? Brother bought a house in Chongming Town. Everyone can live there. In the future, he will open a restaurant. Sisters, you can earn your own living. The girls looked hesitant. Zhao Ying smiled. Brother said that we have to earn our own living. We can either stay in the house and be his servants or help out in the restaurant. We can't just be idlers. All the girls nodded. They would rather work to support themselves. Idling around was a very painful thing. Working would allow them to think less nonsense. Sister Zhao, what if someone wants to stay? It's not safe here. Someone might come here any time. Just like this monk. Didn't he come looking for us? Fortunately, he is not a bad person. If not, we would be in danger. Almsgiver Zhao, these ladies have converted to Buddha. I will send them to a nunnery to cultivate and forgive their sins. The monk pressed his palms together and smiled. Zhao Ying was stunned. Converted? The monk nodded and smiled. Yes, they have been influenced by the Dharma and have turned to Buddha with sincerity. Not necessarily? Zhao Ying frowned and glanced at the girls. They looked at her helplessly. Zhao Ying pulled the girl who stood up out of the hall and whispered to her. She lowered her voice and looked at the monk in the hall. Sister Zhang, what's going on? The girl's name was Zhang Fu. She had a gentle temperament. She shook her head and whispered, This monk is an eminent monk from the Tempest Temple. He has a profound understanding of Dharma. We think that he is right. Sister Zhang, we still have a long way to go. Zhao Ying said disapprovingly. Let's go to Chongming Town and start a new life. Little Sister Zhao, we are both ruined flowers and withered willows. We are destined to have no future. Nonsense, my senior, and I will not ignore everyone. We are actually the public house's guards. The public house. Zhang Fu was surprised. Zhao Ying nodded slowly, so you don't have to worry. Brother, and I can take care of you. Zhang Fu looked at her from head to toe. Zhao Ying smiled. Why? Don't I look like one? I didn't expect you to be from the public house. If we knew, we wouldn't have to worry. Zhang Fu shook her head and sighed. In the eyes of outsiders, the public house was powerful and influential. They could be said to be the pinnacle of existence. If they could build a relationship with the public house, there was nothing to be afraid of. Sister Zhang, go and persuade the others. They should live a good life and become nuns. What's the point? It's better to live a happy life. Yes, I will persuade them. The two chatted for a while and returned to the hall. Zhang Fu whispered to the girls. The girls looked at Chu Li and Zhao Ying with surprise and excitement. The monk's face darkened. He chanted the name of Buddha and shook his head, sighing, The sea of bitterness has no bounds. Repent and be saved. Ladies, you are so stubborn. It's sad. Chu Li smiled. Monk, you need to be sincere to Buddha. You can't force it. Almsgiver Chu, the leader of the Raging Tiger Troop, died in your hands, right? Yes. What martial arts did he use? Forgive me for my ignorance. I didn't recognize it. He was a traitor of our temple. Oh, although he was a traitor, he was still a disciple of our temple. He still had his martial arts. Since Almsgiver Chu was able to kill him, I would like to have a taste of your martial arts. Chu Li smiled. Could it be that you want to avenge him? Almsgiver Chu, you are wrong. The monk shook his head. I came here to take care of this traitor. He has already been beheaded. I can't go back empty-handed. What do you mean? Chu Li smiled. Are you saying that you can punish a traitor of your temple, but not others? Umaba. The monk pressed his palms together. Chu Li sneered. What a tyrannical Tempest temple. Almsgiver Chu, this rule is not unique to our temple. It's the same for all sects. The monk said, Are you trying to take my life? Of course not. The monk shook his head. He is a traitor. He deserves to die. Almsgiver Chu, you only need to defeat me, and all the grudges will be written off. What if I can't? Just one arm is enough. Interesting. Chu Li laughed. What a Tempest temple. Fine, please. Please. The monk pressed his palms together. Almsgiver Chu, please do your best and don't make a mistake. Chu Li laughed and unsheathed his sword. Zhao Ying frowned and glared at the monk. You call yourself a monk? Hypocrite. Chu Li shook his head. With the omniscient mirror, he could see through the monk's thoughts. This old monk was a vicious person. Although he said that he only needed one arm, he actually wanted to kill him. If he lost, he would definitely die. He looked like a Buddhist monk, but he was so cunning. Buddhism could not erase one's personality. "Forgive me," Chu Li shouted and pulled out his sword. Ding! Chu Li's palm and the long sword collided. The long sword was deflected, and a cold inner energy flowed through the long sword into his palm, heading towards his heart. Chu Li realized that the first level of the infinite azure, C, could not block it. He quickly layered it up, and only after twice did he manage to block the inner energy from entering his heart. What a vicious palm energy. Once it reached his heart, his life would be in danger. He staggered 2 steps back, his face flushed red. He continued to layer the infinite azure sea and managed to forcefully thrust his sword forward. The monk smiled and slammed his palm down again. Bang! A muffled sound was heard. The monk's eyes widened as he retreated. He desperately tried to dissolve the inner energy that had entered his body. He was deceived by Chu Li and thought that Chu Li was at his weakest. He did not expect Chu Li's inner energy to be so strong. Chu Li followed closely and stabbed his sword into his shoulder. Ding! The sound of metal clashing could be heard. The sword did not manage to pierce through. Chapter 34. The monk raised his head and glared at Chu Li. He yelled and slammed his palm towards the sword. Chu Li raised his sword and pointed it at the monk's palm. The monk's palm did not change its direction and met the tip of the sword. Ding! Chu Li's sword trembled. Pure and dense inner energy flowed through the sword, but was blocked by an invisible force. It could not enter the monk's meridians. Chu Li was surprised. The sentient menace was indeed powerful. It could block the attack of inner energy. He took a step back and stabbed again. Ding! The monk blocked his chest with his palm, and the tip of the sword pierced his palm. Fa Shan was shocked. The position of the sword was exactly the same as the previous one, piercing the same spot. Such a sword technique was indeed shocking. Chu Li's feet moved and dissolved the inner energy in his palm. He stabbed again, fast as lightning. Ding! The monk could not help but raise his palm again and was stabbed at the same spot. His palm was slightly numb. The sentient menace was showing signs of being broken. His face changed. He did not dare to let Chu Li stab him again. He took the initiative to attack. Huh! He roared like thunder and hit his palms on the temple to force Chu Li to retreat. However, Chu Li did not retreat. Instead, he stabbed again. The angle was tricky and the speed was like lightning. Ding! He stabbed at the same spot again. The monk's face darkened. He was even more shocked. Chu Li's swordsmanship was too amazing. If this continued, he would not be able to win. His vigor was unstable. The sentient menace was unstable. He quickly changed his palm into a fist and punched. His fist carried the wind. It was fierce and heavy. Ding! Chu Li's sword pierced the tip of the monk's fist. Then, Chu Li attacked again and again. It was like a flash of lightning, extremely fast. Fashion made up his mind and simply did not evade or evade. Whenever he saw the sword coming, he would either use his fists or his palms or even the sleeves of his monk's robe to avoid being stabbed by the sword's tip. His soft sleeves were like knives and spears with astonishing power. The two of them were in a stalemate. He could not dodge Chu Li's sword, and Chu Li could not break through his sentient menace. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 moves had passed. Zhaoing watched from the side with her eyes wide open. She was impressed by Chu Li's swordsmanship. At the same time, she was impressed by the monk. He did not live in vain. Bang! Suddenly, there was a muffled sound. Chu Li suddenly switched his sword to a palm and clashed with the monk's palm. Both of them took a step back. Chu Li took a step back and sheathed his sword. He waved his palms and fought with Fa Shan. In the blink of an eye, they had exchanged more than 100 blows. The monk's face darkened. He did not expect Chu Li's inner energy to be so profound. Wave after wave of inner energy seemed to be endless. The sentient menace could block swords, and it could also block the invasion of palm energy. It was extremely powerful, but it had one drawback, which was that it consumed a lot of energy. It required a huge amount of inner energy to operate. Even if his inner energy was profound, he could not hold on for too long, especially when Chu Li's palm energy was ferocious. Every move of his was accompanied by a turbulent flow of inner energy. He had no choice but to activate the sentient menace, which consumed a lot of his energy. After 200 moves, the monk actually felt that his inner energy had been drained. After reaching the innate mastery level, it was rare for him to feel this way. Usually, when he activated the sentient menace, he would be able to defeat his opponent in a few moves. Pong! Another muffled sound, the two palms collided. The monk suddenly turned around and left. Chu Li scoffed. "Monk, why are you in such a hurry to leave?" Of course, Chu Li would not allow someone who wanted to kill him to leave. There would be no end to his troubles. He channeled his inner energy to his feet and arrived behind the monk in 3 steps. The monk suddenly turned his head and pushed his palm forward. Chu Li was already prepared for this move. He knew that this palm would be extremely powerful. It was the Tempest Temple's mountain-pushing palm. When the inner energy was stacked like the infinite azure sea, it was extremely powerful. He took a step to the side and dodged the attack. Then, he went forward and attacked with his palm. Pong! The monk hastily responded. Both palms collided. He could not help but stagger a step back. Chu Li did not let him go and attacked again. The monk was not stable and could not block his attack in time. His chest was hit by Chu Li, and he took another step back. The sentient menace blocked Chu Li's palm energy, but it could not reduce the impact. The monk could only retreat. Chu Li followed up with another palm strike on the same spot. The monk angrily waved his palms, but he could not change his situation. He could not control his body and could not avoid Chu Li's lightning-fast palms. As he retreated, he was hit by Chu Li 3 more times. Puff! The monk could no longer hold back the blood that was gushing out. He opened his mouth, and a stream of blood shot out. Chu Li was as calm as still water. He was not affected by the monk and attacked again. Pong! A muffled sound was heard. The monk and Chu Li both took 2 steps back. The monk sneered. This palm strike was enough to make this boy suffer. No matter how cunning he was, he still had to drink the water he used to wash his feet. The reason he spat out blood earlier was so that he could catch him off guard. The power of the mountain-pushing palm was not something that a normal human body could withstand. Chu Li took 2 steps back. There were 3 deep footprints under his feet. His inner energy was completely transferred to the ground. He saw through the monk's thoughts. He was also prepared for the monk's attack. His palm energy was weak, but not solid. He subtly transferred it to his feet. "You?" The monk's face darkened. He looked at Chu Li's footprints. He knew that something was wrong. Chu Li laughed. His laughter was clear and bright. There was no sign of injury. "Monk, your sentient menace is almost done, right?" "Umaba." The monk's face turned serious. He pressed his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. He took a deep breath. "Almsgiver Shao, I have lost. The grudge between me and the raging tiger troop is written off." "Thank you very much, monk." Chu Li smiled. The monk pressed his palms together and turned around to leave. Chu Li appeared in front of him in a flash. He blocked the monk's path. "Why are you in such a hurry to leave?" "Almsgiver Chu, what are you trying to do?" The monk's face darkened. Chu Li smiled. "What you were trying to do just now was what I was trying to do." "Almsgiver Chu, it was just a friendly match. Why do you have to hurt our friendship?" The monk shook his head. "My temple and your public house have always minded our own business. Please don't start a fight because of us." Chu Li shook his head. "You're wrong. You can't represent the Tempest Temple. I can't represent the public house. It's just a personal grudge. Monk, please. I'm no match for you." The monk shook his head and sighed. "Almsgiver Chu, you're a genius. I admire you. If you really want to kill me, I will not resist." Zhao Ying said softly. "Brother." Chu Li glanced at Zhao Ying. He looked at the ladies who looked like they could not bear to see this. He then looked at the monk and laughed. "You've got some tricks up your sleeve." The monk smiled and pressed his palms together. "If that's the case, I'll take my leave." He turned and walked in another direction. Chu Li wanted to stop him. Zhao Ying quickly said, "Brother, forget it. Let the monk go." Sigh. Chu Li shook his head and sighed. "Forgive and forget," Zhao Ying quickly said. Moreover, he's a monk from the Tempest Temple. She knew how powerful the Tempest Temple was. It was the #1 faction in the world. They were as powerful as a towering tree. They were everywhere. The public house was slightly inferior. It was best not to offend them. If the Tempest Temple really wanted to kill him, Chuli would not be able to escape no matter how powerful he was. Ever since the Tempest Temple was established, no traitor had ever escaped from them. There were no exceptions. Chuli looked at the monk's back and shook his head. This old monk is not one to forgive and forget. He won't give up. So what if he won't give up? It's not like he can defeat you. Zhao laughed. She did not expect Chu Li's martial arts to be so powerful. He was a new innate master. The old monk from the Tempest Temple must have been an innate master for many years. His cultivation level was high, and he was able to leave the temple. He would not embarrass the Tempest Temple. She did not expect him to lose to Chu Li. Chu Li sighed. He's still going to pester me. It's better to end this once and for all. Brother, don't kill if you can. Besides, if you really kill him, the Tempest Temple will not let you go. They will definitely kill you. Do you think you can escape from them? Unless you stay in the public house forever. Wouldn't that be boring? Sometimes you have to kill. Chu Li shook his head. He saw through the monk's heart. There was no gratitude, only hatred. He wanted to kill Chu Li. Sparing him would only bring trouble to Chu Li. The only way was to kill him. Anyway, he's a disciple from the Tempest Temple. Don't kill him if you can, Zhao Ling said. Chu Li knew that she was doing this for his sake. He smiled. For the sake of my sister, I'll let him go for now. That's right. Zhao Ling pursed her lips and smiled. The women were divided into 2 groups. The older ones did not want to leave the valley. They wanted to live out their lives here. They wanted to be isolated from the world. They wanted to live out their lives in peace. The younger ones wanted to follow Chu Li. After all, they were still young. They liked prosperity. They did not want to live out their lives in this boring valley. In the end, 50 of them left the valley. The remaining 100 or so stayed. There were horses in the village. There were enough for each of them to ride 2 horses. Those who did not know how to ride could share a horse. They left the valley in the evening. Zhao Ling wanted to stay for the night and leave the next day. Chu Li insisted on leaving at night. The group took advantage of the darkness to continue their journey. They held torches and walked slowly. In the middle of the night, they rested in a forest. Chu Li asked them to surround a tree and form a circle. Zhao Ling sat at the outermost circle while Chu Li leaped onto the tree. Brother, the raging tiger troop is gone. Will there be a robbery? Zhao Ling leaped onto the tree and stood beside him. A faint fragrance wafted into Chu Li's nose. Moreover, even if there is a robbery, it won't happen at this time, right? Chu Li shook his head. Are you worried about the old monk? Yes. Is he really that bad? If you think that people who study Buddhism can become good people, then you are wrong. The disciples of the Tempest Temple won't be bad, right? Good and bad are relative. Good is good, bad is bad. From the perspective of a good monk, I kill the disciple of the Tempest Temple. He must kill me to uphold the dignity of the Tempest Temple. He thinks that his actions are righteous. It is good, but from our point of view, it is bad. Of course it is bad. Chu Li shook his head. Do you have brothers? Yes, I have 2 brothers. Let's say you have an unfilial brother. He beat your father and ran away from home. You wanted to catch him and bring him back for punishment. But before you could catch him, someone killed him. What would you do? Zhao Ling rolled her eyes at him. Chu Li smiled. Of course, it is just an example. Would you avenge your brother? Of course, Zhao Ling said unhappily. Chu Li shrugged. From our perspective, he wants to kill us. He is a cunning and dangerous person. He might even be a threat to the people around us. Of course, we have to kill him. Zhao Ling frowned. She felt that the world was very complicated. Hey. Chapter 35. Swoosh. A light whistled as a ray of cold light shot towards Chu Li. Chu Li dodged to the side. Amipa. A loud Buddhist chant came from the forest, echoing through the entire forest. The monk's voice was heard. Almsgiver Chu, greetings. Chu Li scoffed. Monk, I spared your life, and now you're asking for it. Almsgiver Chu, do you dare to fight me? As soon as he finished speaking, the monk and the two monks in gray robes appeared. They stood 10 meters away from the women and looked up at Chu Li. Their eyes were calm and solemn. The monk smiled. The two middle-aged monks were expressionless as they stared at Chu Li coldly. Even when they looked up, their eyes were looking down at him as if they were looking at an unworthy disciple. Chu Li gave Zhaoing a look and asked her to stay at the side. He landed 5 steps away from the monk. One look, and he knew these two monks were brothers. Their appearances were ordinary. Their bald heads were flat like saucers, and they had the appearance of a Xian Tian master. Both of them were skinny, as if they were malnourished. However, Chu Li could see that their bodies were full of energy. Their cultivation level was not any lower than the monks. The three of them together could be a fatal threat to him. The two middle-aged monks looked at Chu Li and then at Zhao Ying and the women. They furrowed their brows in disgust, as if they had seen something ugly. Chu Li knew what they were thinking and shook his head. They had a deep hatred for these women. Women were the source of all evil, and beautiful women were the source of all disasters. It was no wonder that their martial nephews had fallen. Of course, it was because they lacked self-control, but it was also because these women were too alluring. They were the main culprits. Chu Li could feel their killing intent towards the women. Almsgiver Chu, you are young, but your cultivation level is high. I am ashamed. The three of us can only fight together. The monk pressed his palms together and smiled. If Almsgiver Chu can escape unscathed, I will not bother you anymore. I will turn around and leave. Chu Li chuckled. The monk's words were just a bait to calm him down and prevent him from escaping. Almsgiver Chu, why don't we spar again? The monk smiled. Chu Li nodded. I would like to. Please. The monk's smile widened. He was filled with killing intent. The eyes of the two middle-aged monks flickered with killing intent. The three of them were determined to kill Chu Li no matter what. The three of them could set up the small 3 talents formation, which would multiply its power. Even if Chu Li had extraordinary abilities, he would not be able to escape even if he had wings. Chu Li placed his hand on the hilt of his sword and sighed. Monk, are you really going to fight to the death? Why do you say that, Mr. Chu? The monk smiled. It's just a friendly match. Chu Li shook his head. He was speechless at the monk's hypocrisy. It was rare for a monk to say one thing, but mean another. It was a Buddhist precept that monks did not lie. The monk was just playing around the edges. Chu Li suddenly raised his hands. TSK. Chi. 2 beams of cold light shot out. The two middle-aged monks suddenly froze. They covered their throats and stared at Chu Li with their eyes wide open. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Bang! Bang! The two of them fell to the ground on their backs, an exquisite flying knife in their throats. Blood gushed out and soaked the dried leaves on the ground. Chu Li's expression did not change as he looked at the monk. The smile on the monk's face froze. He looked at the 2 juniors in disbelief. He then looked at Chu Li. His face glowed faintly as he channeled the sentient menace. Umaba. The monk placed his palms together and chanted. As soon as he chanted, his expression became serious again. He looked at the juniors on the ground with pity and looked up at Chu Li. Mr. Chu, aren't you afraid of being hunted down by the temple? Chu Li smiled. I'm a scribe of the public house. The Tempest Temple can't just barge into the public house to capture me, right? Will the public house support you? Of course. All right, I'll take my leave now. The monk laughed coldly. He looked at the women and turned to leave. Chu Li watched as he slowly walked away. He did not chase after him. The monk held a hidden weapon in his hand under his robe. He was ready to shoot at the women at any time. If he were to make a move, he would shoot the hidden weapon first to distract himself. Zhao Ying landed in front of him. She glanced at the 2 monks on the ground and sighed helplessly. She was afraid that things would escalate to this point. In the end, it was still the worst-case scenario. They were already killed. Now she had to worry about Chu Li's life. She urged, Brother, hurry up and chase after him. If he escapes, the Tempest Temple will find out. Chu Li shook his head. Forget it. I'll spare his life. Brother, how could you be so muddle-headed? Zhao Ying said anxiously. We have to catch him. We can't let him leak out any information. Chuli smiled. The guards of the public house are not afraid of the Tempest Temple. Let's go. The monk did not have the kindness and stupidity of a monk. He was ruthless and unscrupulous. He should not be allowed to live. However, Chuli had the women with him. He had to send them back to Chongming Town first. Zhao Ying stomped her feet. Her eyes widened. She was anxious and helpless. Brother, I really don't know what to say about you. Chuli said, you have to be careful in the future. The Tempest Temple might even hunt you down. It's better if you don't go out. Zhao Ying frowned and slowly nodded. She was really worried. The Tempest Temple was overbearing. They would definitely accuse her of being an accomplice and hunt her down together. Sigh, what headache? She looked at Chu Li and shook her head. Chuli smiled. Don't worry. No matter how overbearing the Tempest Temple is, they won't dare to cause trouble in Chongming Town. I hope so. Zhao Ying sighed. The women were worried too. They urged them to hurry up and set off. The women left through the night. They arrived at Chongming Town the next evening. The hundreds of horses were imposing. The guard's expression changed. When Chuli showed him his waist tag, the guard let out a sigh of relief. He smiled apologetically. The public house was the boss of Chongming Town. The guards of the public house did not have the right to interfere. They could only let them pass. More than 50 beauties entered the town. They attracted many gazes. Although they were not the most beautiful, they were all beauties. Everyone around them could find their own type of beauty. Zhao Ying rushed back to the public house to look for Li Yu. Chuli brought them back to the new house. When they arrived at the house, Li Yu was already waiting with the main door open. Although he knew there were many people, he was still shocked when he saw the 50 beauties. He looked from one to the other. He felt that his eyes were not enough. Brother, this. He pulled Chuli over and whispered, where did all these beauties come from? Chuli shook his head and smiled. We'll talk about it later. Anyway, settle them down. Tell me about it first. Li Yu could not suppress his curiosity. Where did they come from? I'll tell you. Hurry up. Chuli pushed him. Li Yu helplessly went forward to greet the women. He had already familiarized himself with the house for the past 2 days. He quickly assigned them a place to stay. There were many rooms, but it was not enough for one person to stay in one room. 2 people had to squeeze into one room. Chuli pulled Zhao Ying over and told her to find a tailor to make 2 sets of clothes after they had settled down. They would then leave the house to get used to the environment. Zhao Ying nodded. No problem. Leave it to me. Brother, where are you going? Chuli said, to chase after the monk. Is it too late to chase after him now? I'll give it a try. How can you catch up? I have to give it a try. Then it's better not to go. Zhao Ying shook her head. We won't be able to catch up. Even if we do, the news will have already been leaked. Why waste our time? Chuli shook his head. The monk is dangerous. We have to get rid of him. What if he has helpers? It's better to be careful. If he can find 2, he can find others. Zhao Ying said. Chuli nodded and left without a sound. Zhao Ying looked at his back and frowned. She was worried. The monks from the Tempest Temple were not to be trifled with. Where's my brother? Li Yu asked. Sister Zhao, are you all right? I'm fine. Zhao Ying hid her worry. Sorry to trouble you, brotherly. Sigh, it's no big deal. It's an honor to be able to serve so many beauties. Li Yu waved his hand and laughed. All right, Sister Zhao, why are there so many beauties? About that, I'll tell you next time. Zhao Ying smiled. Li Yu sighed and nodded helplessly. They were all so tight-lipped, but he had a feeling that there was something fishy about the origins of these beauties. Fortunately, they were all easygoing and did not have any bad tempers. Chuli glided out of the city. He did not ride a horse, but instead, he used his light body technique to travel quickly. The gushing spring under his feet kept surging with inner energy from all directions. It was endless, supporting him to use his light body technique to its fullest. When he reached the forest where they were resting, Chuli saw the monk's footprints. He used the omniscient mirror to search for them and followed the monk's footprints. The omniscient mirror covered an area of 3 miles, so he did not have to stop to search for the monk's footprints. In the morning, Chuli arrived at the peak of a mountain. He stopped in front of a stone wall that was more than 10 meters tall. There was a cave halfway up the stone wall. The monk was sitting cross-legged in the cave, meditating. Suddenly, he felt Chu Li's approach and opened his eyes. He quickly poked his head out. Chu Li stood under the stone wall and waved. "Monk, we meet again. Almsgiver Chu, what do you want?" The monk's face darkened. He stood at the entrance of the cave and shouted, "Are you trying to kill me?" Chu Li said, "Isn't that what you did? I'm just returning it to you." Chapter 36. Chu Li raised his eyebrows and nodded to himself. He had already activated the omniscient mirror. The monk was indeed cunning and decisive. He immediately consumed the secret medicine to stimulate his body's potential and increase his power by several folds. The sentient menace was activated to its maximum, and a purplish gold color appeared. The sentient menace had a total of 36 forms and was divided into 6 levels: skin training, flesh training, tendon training, meridian training, bone training, and marrow training. The first level was gold in color, and the second was purplish gold. Once the purplish gold light appeared, one would be invulnerable. "I'm about Buddha," the monk chanted and suppressed his anger and murderous intent. He floated in front of Chu Li like a leaf and struck with his palm. Chu Li turned around and left. He had the infinite azure sea, which could increase his power. The Tempest Temple was the #1 sect in the world. Naturally, they had no lack of such martial arts. It was just that no one had the life and death scripture, so they rarely cultivated it. Even if they did, they would not dare to use it. However, in a life or death situation, they would no longer care about it. The monk's power increased by several folds, and he used the mountain pushing palm. Chu Li did not go straight for it and avoided it. "Where do you think you're going?" The monk roared and took a big step forward like a meteor. In an instant, he was behind Chu Li. His palm seemed slow, but it reached Chu Li's back in an instant. Chu Li dodged the attack as soon as he thought about it and dashed into the forest. The monk followed closely behind. His movement technique was extremely fast, and his palm was like lightning. Chu Li was always able to avoid it by a hair's breadth. In a short while, the two of them chased for 10 miles. Chu Li kept moving through the forest and used the trees to block the monk's attack. The small trees that were the size of a wrist were broken by the monk's palm. The monk's power was amazing. Everywhere he passed, more than 20 trees were broken in half. The monk's face was filled with anger, and a purplish gold light flashed. He looked like an angry Arhut with a fierce aura. Chu Li knew that he could not last long. No matter how powerful the medicine he consumed was, it would not last long, so he patiently dealt with the monk. The infinite azure sea had 3 levels, and his meridians were aching. Thinking about this, he took out a white porcelain bottle and poured 2 torso refinement pills into his mouth. After the tendon-connecting pill entered his stomach, it quickly turned into a clear stream of energy that flowed through his meridians, nourishing the meridians that had been stretched to the limit and repairing the minor injuries that had appeared. While Chu Li was using his light body technique, he was glad that he had the torso refinement pill. He was able to hold on. Now, it was a battle of attrition between him and the monk. Let's see who could last until the end. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had chased each other for more than 50 miles. Just as they were about to leave the forest, the monk suddenly turned around and disappeared from Chu Li's sight. Chu Li slowed down. He was not in a hurry to give chase. He could tell that the monk was trying to turn around. If he really gave chase, he would fall right into the monk's trap. The monk was waiting for him with the mountain-pushing palm's strongest attack. Leaning against the tree, the surging spiritual energy entered his body and circulated according to the mental cultivation method of the minute pulse cleansing technique, repairing his meridians. It was as if he was in a hot spring. Activating the minute meridian cleansing incantation with his wood's spiritual energy, the effect was strong and quick. In just a moment, the pain in his meridians disappeared and they returned to their original state. In fact, they even became a little more resilient. Chu Li was not in a hurry to give chase. The monk's strength had increased tremendously, and it was difficult for him to control his strength. His footprints were even clearer than before. With the omniscient mirror, he had nowhere to hide. Half an hour later, Chu Li estimated that the effects of the poison had worn off. He glided forward and chased for another half an hour before he saw the monk in front of a wide river. He was sitting on a green stone the size of a bed. Facing the surging river, he sat in a lotus position, looking solemn and dignified. Feeling Chu Li's approach, he suddenly opened his eyes and frowned at Chu Li. Chu Li stood beside the river with the surging river behind him. He smiled at the monk. "Monk, we meet again. Almsgiver Chu, how did you find me?" The monk asked calmly. His voice was slightly hoarse. Chu Li smiled. "My nose is very sensitive." Facing such a cunning person, he naturally could not tell the truth. "I see." The monk shook his head and sighed. "Almsgiver Chu, you are indeed a genius. It's a pity that you did not join our temple." "What a pity!" The monk was so weak that it seemed like it was difficult for him to speak. The side effects of the secret medicine had taken effect. Chu Li smiled. "I feel that it's a pity too. Are you ready to be on your way, monk?" The monk smiled at him and dashed towards the river at an incredible speed. Chu Li swung his arm and a cold glint shot towards the monk. Then the river water rolled over his body. His body was dyed red and was quickly washed away. His body sank to the bottom of the river. Chu Li's omniscient mirror noticed that the monk was not seriously injured. He shot the knife at his throat, but it did not kill him. Chu Li frowned. This person was too difficult to deal with. The weakness he showed earlier was just a disguise. The Tempest Temple really could not be underestimated. It was obvious that they had secret medicine that could restrain weakness. The flying knife had only pierced through the skin of his throat. Quite a bit of blood flowed out, but it was not a big deal. Chu Li glided along the river and chased after the monk who was drifting along with the river. He wanted to give him another blow and completely destroy him. The monk held his breath and swam at the bottom of the river. Unfortunately, Chu Li's omniscient mirror could see him. No matter how hard he tried to hide, he could not escape. Chu Li followed him from afar and did not rush into the water. Chu Li did not know how to swim. If he went down, he would be restricted. The river water would suppress the power of the flying knife. However, no matter how long the monk soaked in the water, he would have to go ashore eventually. After an hour, the monk felt that he had almost shaken off Chu Li. He leaped out of the river. His body glowed with a faint purplish gold light. Even so, he was still cautious of Chu Li. Chu Li glided forward. The two of them fought by the river. Soon, they had exchanged hundreds of blows. The monk turned around and left. Chu Li chased after him, but he could not do anything to the monk. Once the sentient menace was activated, he was invulnerable. The flying knife was ineffective and could only exhaust his inner energy. Soon, the two of them entered a forest. Chu Li suddenly frowned and stopped. There were 4 bald monks lying in ambush in the forest. Their cultivation levels were not bad. One of them was even stronger than the monk. It seemed that the Tempest Temple had a communication method that he did not know about. Through the omniscient mirror, he knew that the monk did not know about the 4 monks' appearance. It was the 4 monks who found the monk. Chu Li shook his head and finally sighed. "Monk, consider yourself lucky. Goodbye." He turned around and glided away. The monk stood at the same spot and watched him leave. He frowned. He did not understand why Chu Li would be so kind as to spare his life. The 4 monks flew over. Their gray robes fluttered in the wind. They landed beside the monk. One of the monks asked, "Brother, are you all right? Should we chase after him?" "It's you guys." The monk suddenly realized and shook his head. "We can't catch up. Are we just going to let him go?" "Brother, this person is cunning and cunning. We have to be careful. Are you scared of him?" Brother Fa Zheng and Brother Fa Yin have been killed by him. They are now in paradise. He killed Fa Zheng and Brother Fa Yin. "Brother, he is so young, and yet he has such a high cultivation level. Which faction is he from?" "The E-Public House." "The E-Public House has been declining in recent years. For them to have such a person, could it be Master Shao? He's just a guard. A guard is so powerful. Looks like the E-Public House is not to be underestimated." The crowd discussed among themselves, but they did not have the intention to chase after him. The monk explained the situation, and the 4 monks looked serious. Junior brother Fa Shan This is not a small matter. A middle-aged monk frowned. Such a person needs to be eliminated as soon as possible. If not, he will become a threat to the Tempest Temple in the future. Yes, I have the same intention. Brothers from the Exorcist College, please make your move. Chapter 37. In the end, Chuli suppressed his urge to kill the monk and returned to Chongming Town. It was already evening and the lanterns were lit. When he returned to his residence, the whole house was brightly lit. Sweet laughter could be heard from time to time. Chuli smiled. He was glad to hear them laugh. He hoped that they could get over their trauma and start a new life. As he stepped into the outer courtyard, Liu came out to welcome him. He quickly pulled him back. "Brother, you're finally back." Chuli smiled. "Is everything settled?" "Finally." Liu wiped his forehead and smiled bitterly. "Brother, if you didn't come back soon, I would have died of exhaustion." Chuli smiled. "Is it really that bad? I'm really impressed by this group of ladies. None of them are easy to deal with." Liu quickly waved his hand, as if avoiding a snake or a scorpion. Chuli raised his eyebrows. "They also know martial arts. Their mouths are too sharp." Liu shook his head and lamented. "One wrong word, and they won't let it go. You talk one after another, and I'm getting dizzy. Brother, I have to go now. The garden needs someone to take care of it." Chuli laughed. "I wanted to find you a nice job. It's so beautiful to be surrounded by so many beauties. I don't have much luck. I can't handle it. You should do it yourself." Liu quickly waved his hand and shook his head. "All right, you can go back first. I'll stay here tonight," Chuli said. Liu looked at him with a strange expression. "You really want to stay here?" "Yes." Chuli nodded. "Can I stay in my own house? Can you handle so many beauties? Get lost. It's not as dirty as you think." Chuli pushed him away. Liu took the chance and left with a smile. Zhaoying walked in and asked softly, "Brother, how was it?" Chuli shook his head. His face darkened. "He escaped." "Escaped?" Zhao Ying's expression changed. "This is going to be troublesome." The Tempest Temple would never let Chuli go. The people they wanted to kill had never failed. Chuli was in danger. Chuli smiled. "It's not that serious. As long as I stay in the public house, no one will dare to act recklessly. Senior brother, you can't just stay in a house forever, right? The Tempest Temple is powerful. They will always hunt you down." Zhao Ying's brows were full of worry. She sighed and said, "What should I do?" Chuli said, "Things will eventually sort themselves out. Have you found a house?" "Me?" Zhao Ying pointed at herself. Chuli smiled. "I'm a man. They'll find it inconvenient. It's better for you to tire yourself out. You're always running around. It's a waste of time. Find a house here and stay once in a while." Zhao Ying hesitated. After all, this was Chuli's residence. What he said was reasonable, and he could not ignore this group of women. However, if they really lived in his residence, it would not be nice if word got out. Moreover, it would be too unreserved and not dignified enough. Chuli smiled. "Don't worry, I won't mess around." Zhao Ying rolled her eyes. Chuli said, "After a while, when they get used to it, you can move out again." As long as she moved in, she would break through her psychological barrier and get closer to him step by step, making it impossible for her to have thoughts of moving out. In order to pursue Zhao Ying, Chuli had put in a lot of effort. Chuli saw that she was hesitating and smiled. "It's settled then. There's no one in my West Wing, right?" "No." Zhao Ying shook her head. "They don't live in the main courtyard. Then you can stay in the West Wing." "But there are so many buts." Chuli interrupted her. "You can't just sit back and do nothing, right? You're always running around. Where would you find the time to cultivate?" "Don't worry, I'll be staying in the East Garden most of the time. I won't be coming back." Zhao Ying was still hesitant, but she did not say anything more. Chuli smiled. "I need to meditate. Please take care of them." Zhao Ying said, "They can do anything. I'm not as good as them." Chuli nodded. "It's like that in the courtyard, but it'll be different in the city." "All right, pick a few people to clean the residence." "Okay." Zhao Ying nodded lightly. Seeing that Chuli's expression was not good, she quickly said, "All right, brother, you should go and rest first." Chuli nodded and returned to the front courtyard. He entered the bedroom on the east side of the hall, sat on the couch, and started channeling. He sat on the couch and recalled the scene of his fight. He summarized the martial arts of the Tempest Temple, observed the heart technique of the monk, and how to deal with it in the future. The Tempest Temple would not let it go, or else it would not be the Tempest Temple. The monk would definitely find helpers to hunt him down. He was an innate master, and he was considered proud of being in the innate master's boundary. But if he met a grandmaster, he would not be able to fight back. The difference between the boundary was like heaven and earth. It was difficult to overcome. The Tempest Temple had a deep foundation. They definitely had many grandmasters. If they were to make a move, he would not be able to survive. He had to cultivate desperately and reach the grandmaster's boundary to protect himself. The grandmaster's boundary was impossible in the public house. It required the boundary of artistic conception. Most of the boundary of artistic conception were in the hands of the major sections. As a scribe of the public house, he could go to some sects to train, but not everyone could go. This kind of training was very precious and rare. Without special contributions, the public house would not give it to the public house guards. He sighed. He still had to do something special. Fortunately, Shao-Chi was open-minded and rewarded him generously. If he did something, he would have a chance. Besides, Shao-Chi had not reached the Grandmaster's boundary. The next morning, Chu Li returned to the public house. When he returned to the East Garden, Li Yu was busy weeding the Moonlight Orchid's flower bed. The weeds in the flower bed grew quickly thanks to Chu Li's spiritual energy supply. They had to be weeded every 2 days. Li Yu looked up and saw him. He let out a strange laugh and sized him up. Chu Li glared at him snappily. Li Yu smiled. How does it feel to be surrounded by beauties? Chu Li glared at him and looked down at the Moonlight Orchid and Nightmare Flower. They were growing well, and he did not have to worry about them. Brother, where did you get so many beauties? Are you going to open another new moon brothel? Li Yu tugged at his sleeve. He was so curious that he did not sleep well the whole night. These women were all charming and seductive. He felt that they were comparable to the beauties in the New Moon brothel. The New Moon brothel was the best brothel in town. It was the best place to squander money. Those who entered the New Moon brothel were either rich or respectable. Most people could not even enter the brothel. Once they entered, they would have to pay 100 taels of silver. 100 taels of silver could buy a small house. Chu Li shook his head and told him about their origins. Li Yu listened and punched his palm hard. He sighed. How pitiful. I didn't expect you to do such a great thing. You have done a great deed. Chu Li smiled bitterly. This is like poking a hornet's nest and provoking great trouble. That village leader was a disciple of the Tempest Temple. Although he was a disciple who betrayed the temple, it was a sin for me to kill him. The Tempest Temple is now hunting me down. The Tempest Temple? Li Yu's eyes widened. Chu Li nodded. Li Yu's jaw dropped. He was speechless. The Tempest Temple was a powerful force. It was even more powerful than the House of High Dukes. As a scribe of the House of High Dukes, they were protected by the House of High Dukes. Most people in the martial arts world would not dare to provoke them. However, the Tempest Temple was different. Chu Li waved his hand. I'll report to the chief. Sigh. Li Yu sighed and nodded. Hurry up. You should stay in the House of High Dukes. Don't go out. It's too dangerous. Even though Chu Li's martial arts was strong, he did not think that Chu Li could withstand the Tempest Temple's pursuit. The Tempest Temple was filled with masters. They were even better than the House of High Dukes. It was said that they had an enlightened master. That was why they were able to stand for thousands of years. Chu Li arrived at the Jade Guardian Island. As soon as he entered the island, Su Ru came to greet him. She wore an apricot gown that fluttered in the wind. She looked at him with a faint smile. Chu Li left the boat and closed fists saluted. Chief. Su Ru waved her hand and smiled. I heard that you bought a house and hid a bunch of beauties there. Chu Li smiled bitterly and shook his head. He sighed and told her everything that happened on this trip. Su Ru's expression changed. She waved her hand and brought him to the top floor of the stargazing tower. He saw Shao-Chi in her white gown brandishing her sword. Chu Li took a step back to avoid the cold. The power of this sword technique was shocking. If he wanted to deal with it, He would need to use the fourth fold of the infinite azure sea. Otherwise, he would not be a match for her. Lady Xiao. Suru waited for Xiao Qi to stop. She caught the long sword and sheathed it. Chu Li is in big trouble again. Xiao Qi looked at him with her watery eyes. Chu Li told her what happened again. A good monk. Xiao Qi pondered and nodded. It should be a disciple of the Tempest Temple's commandment courtyard. They are responsible for hunting down disciples who have broken the precepts. You were able to defeat him. Not bad. Chu Li shook his head. A good monk doesn't seem to be the best. Yes, the martial arts of the commandment courtyard's disciples are average. If they really want to kill you, they will use the exorcist courtyard's disciples. Xiao Qi shook her head. These people kill without batting an eye. Their martial arts are strong. We can't be careless. Lady Xiao, what should we do? Suru frowned. Can we inform the Tempest Temple? It's useless. Xiao Qi said, they are very arrogant. They don't respect the public house. Are we just going to watch Chu Li get killed? Let's hide for a while. Sai, isn't this too depressing? The situation is stronger than the person. If Chu Li really wants to go out, they will not hold back. If they kill him, what can we do? Do they really dare to start a war with the Tempest Temple? Suru scoffed. Then let's warn them first. If they dare to kill Chu Li, we will kill the Tempest Temple's disciples. We will kill every single one of them in the Chongming house. Xiao Qi glared at her. Suru pouted and scoffed. Everyone dares to bully us. It's so infuriating. Chu Li said, Chief, the Tempest Temple is different. Who cares what temple it is? If they offend the public house, they will pay the price. Suru scoffed. You don't use your brain. Xiao Qi shook her head. If the public house is so powerful, they will not be far from being destroyed. Chu Li nodded. If they were so powerful, then where would the imperial palace be? After all, the public house was different from the Tempest Temple. It relied on the imperial power to exist. Chu Li said, all right, then I won't leave the public house for a while. That's for the best. Xiao Qi nodded. Start working on the Spirit Land. It has been prepared. Do you plan to stay on the Jade Guardian Island? Yes. Chu Li nodded. Yes, then it will be on the Jade Guardian Island. Suru, the two of you go pick a place. Try to hide it and help Chu Li, Xiao Qi said. Chapter 38. The two left the stargazing tower. Chu Li saw that Suru was unhappy and smiled. Chief, they can't do anything to me if I stay in the public house. You can't stay in the public house forever, right? Suru scoffed. Even though you're a scribe. After a while, everything will be fine. The Tempest Temple is very busy. They won't be waiting to kill me forever. You're wrong about that. Suru furrowed her brows. These monks are all made of stone. Once they set their sights on something, they will definitely achieve it. None of the people they want to kill have escaped unscathed. You must not be careless. You are not allowed to leave the residence. Will there be any problems in the town? It should be fine in the town. Suru hesitated. After all, they still have their concerns. They don't usually cause trouble in the town, but it's best to stay in the public house. That's good. Chu Li smiled. Suru sighed. You really know how to cause trouble. You've provoked the Tempest Temple. That's a real problem. Chu Li shrugged. I have no choice. I always want to help when I see injustice. If I don't get rid of the Raging Tiger Troop, I'll have to face my conscience. Let's go. Suru did not know what to say. He was indeed doing a good deed, but it was hard for good people to be rewarded. The world was unfair. The two passed through a dense forest, and a small courtyard was hidden by the trees. There were a total of 12 courtyards. They kept a distance from each other and were quiet so that they would not disturb each other. The design was unique. Suru brought him to a courtyard in the middle. This is the guest house of a lady. Suru pointed at the continuous courtyard. It was originally used to entertain friends. It's not used much these years. It's very quiet and no one comes here. Chu Li looked around. Not bad. The courtyard was located in the middle of the forest. It was well hidden and quiet. He liked this kind of place the most. It was full of spiritual energy and the air was fresh. Let's take a look at this one. Suru opened the door to the courtyard. To the west was a bamboo forest. Beside the forest was a small pavilion. To the east was a flower garden. In the flower garden, there was a pond of fish. Sitting in the pavilion, one could admire the bamboo scenery, the flowers, the fish, and the insects. It was quiet and elegant. The two stepped into the courtyard. Chuli looked around and nodded in satisfaction. Then you can stay here. You can stay in the East Garden or here. How about building the spiritual field in the forest? In this courtyard, it's not a small place. Chuli said, you don't need to be too big at the beginning. Just try exploring. He didn't have much experience and only had theories. He needed to know a little bit. If the scene was too big, the loss would be too great if he made a mistake. That's fine too. The spiritual soil will be delivered tonight. Let's start. Suru revealed an excited expression. The Andromeda you gave me last time was very good. Young lady's martial arts improved by leaps and bounds. You contributed a lot. Chuli smiled. But don't be arrogant. Young lady needs a lot of rare herbs to practice martial arts. You might not be able to get them all. Suru smiled and said, at that time, you won't be so proud. Chuli smiled. I understand. Clap, clap. Suru clapped her fair little hands twice. A voluptuous young lady appeared at the entrance of the courtyard. Her figure was explosive. She wore a snow-white gown and was extraordinarily beautiful. She had a dignified bearing, and she was like a young lady from a distinguished family. Her graceful bearing faintly revealed a trace of arrogance. Chuli turned to look at Suru. This is Ling, the maid assigned to you. Suru smiled and said, if you need anything, just tell her to do it. Greetings, master. Ling stepped forward to greet him. I don't think that's necessary. Chuli hesitated. Suru smiled lightly. You can't do everything yourself. You can use Ling without worry. She's very smart. She knows everything about the island. Chuli looked at Ling and activated the omniscient mirror. She was a proud person. She looked respectful on the outside, but she was disdainful on the inside. She did not take him seriously at all. It was not easy to use such a maid. Why, you don't like her? Suru smiled and said, Ling, she's the prettiest on the island. You don't like her? Chuli looked at Ling and smiled. Wouldn't it be a waste of her talent? You're rank 6, and she's only rank 8. It's not a waste of her talent. All right, you can do it yourself. I'll come back tonight. Suru waved her little hand and stopped before she turned around. All right, Ling also knows martial arts. She's not that delicate. You can't bully her. I don't have the guts. Chuli laughed. Suru chuckled. Her gown fluttered and she slowly left. Chuli looked at Ling. Ling's eyes were lowered. Her fair and delicate face was tense. She did not move an inch like a statue, allowing him to stare at her as he wished. Chuli coughed softly. Don't be so serious. He walked into the pagoda and sat down at the stone table. Ling walked in gracefully. She stretched out her slender hands and started to busy herself. She added water to the red clay stove and lit it up. Her movements were skillful and elegant. It was pleasing to the eye. Chuli looked at her movements and said gently, I'm a very picky person. I have a lot of problems and requests. I hope you won't cry to the chief. Don't worry, master. I'll fulfill my duty as a maid. Ling said lightly. Chuli smiled. All right, that's all I ask. Duty. I'll do my duty. Ling replied coldly. The maids of the public house were also guards of the public house. They belonged to the public house and were not private property. Chuli could not do whatever he wanted. Chuli shook his head and sighed. It was not comfortable to have such a beautiful maid by his side. The power of a beautiful woman was invisible. It made one's hands and feet tied. He could not order her around. It would be best if it was a male scribe. Unfortunately, the men on the Jade Guardian Island were all protectors. There were no scribes. The red clay stove gurgled and white steam rose. Ling took out a white jade teacup and brewed a cup of tea elegantly. She presented it with both hands. Her expression was cold and her actions were respectful. Chuli took the teacup and took a sip. The tea was fragrant and refreshing. The tea was good. The skill of making tea was also good. It was obvious that she had undergone strict training. As he drank the tea and admired the rustling of the green bamboo, his thoughts gradually drifted away. How should he deal with the pursuit of the Tempest Temple? Although the Tempest Temple did not usually cause trouble in the town, it was not impossible. It was as if there was a sword hanging above his head that could fall at any time. The only way was to break through to the Grandmaster's boundary. If he wanted to reach the Grandmaster's boundary, he needed to achieve the boundary. He could only gain the opportunity to enter the faction to train. However, Lady Xiao needed to complete the innate mastery first. Since he had done something, Lady Xiao did not need to rely on him anymore. Only then would he have the opportunity to enter the faction to train. He just did not know what kind of spirit herbs Lady Xiao needed and whether he could grow them. They were both innate mastery, but there was a difference in the level of attainment. Once he had achieved the true oneness of heaven and man, his inner energy would be as pure as the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Chu Li benefited from the life and death scripture and the omniscient mirror. After entering the innate mastery, he entered the later stage. If he wanted to enter the Grandmaster's boundary, the only thing he lacked was the boundary. Although they were both innate mastery, their techniques were different. Their abilities could not be compared. The infinite azure sea was strong, but it could not be compared to the sentient menace. When the sentient menace was cultivated to its peak, even an innate mastery could dominate the world. Thinking of this, his mind was clear. The sentient menace. The most important thing now was to cultivate the sentient menace so that he could escape even if he encountered an assassination. He got up and walked to the pagoda. He got into a strange posture and started to cultivate the sentient menace. A vast amount of inner energy flowed into his body. He kept activating the heart technique of the sentient menace. The pure and vast inner energy turned into a strange aura that traveled through his skin, flesh, muscles, and bones. The cultivation of the sentient menace was very energy-consuming. An innate master would not be able to cultivate it for more than a few times before he ran out of inner energy. Relying on the life and death scripture, Chu Li's inner energy was almost endless. As he continued to cultivate, he advanced very quickly. Without his life and death scripture, the disciples of the Tempest Temple would need to consume pills to cultivate. They would need a lot of pills, and the sentient menace was cultivated by piling up pills. Only a faction like the Tempest Temple could afford to cultivate it. For a normal faction, even if they had the sentient menace secret manual, they would not be able to cultivate it. They could not afford to consume so many pills. Through the sentient menace heart technique, the vast inner energy turned into a strange aura that traveled through his muscles. He felt more energetic and powerful. He cultivated it again and again, almost non-stop. He cultivated from morning until noon. He only stopped when Shuel Ling brought him lunch. He went into the living room and sat at the square table to eat quietly. He did not say a word, still immersed in the cultivation of the sentient menace. Shuel Ling stood at the side and looked at him without saying a word. In the bright living room, only the sound of Chu Li chewing could be heard clearly. After a while, Chu Li put down his chopsticks. "I'm going out for a while. You don't have to follow me." "Yes," Shuel Ling replied respectfully. After eating, Chu Li did not cultivate. Instead, he took a stroll to digest the food. He left the courtyard and went through the forest to the edge of the island. He boarded a small boat and returned to the East Garden. Li was cooking. When he saw Chu Li, he quickly asked what he wanted to eat. Chu Li told him that he had finished eating. Li looked at him helplessly. Chu Li told him that he would be spending most of his time on the Jade Guardian Island. Liu's eyes lit up. "Brother, you're rich." Chu Li smiled. Liu brought out the food and sat on the stone table to eat. The Jade Guardian Island is Lady Zhao's private place. If you can stay there, it means that you've entered Lady Zhao's circle. Success is just around the corner. Chu Li smiled. "It's not that easy. If you don't do your job well, Lady Xiao won't be merciful." "That's true." Liu swallowed his food and agreed with him. Lady Xiao is fair and impartial. She won't tolerate any mistakes. If you try to dawdle or do something bad, Lady Xiao won't hold back. "Be careful," Chu Li said. "I'll leave the East Garden to you from now on." "Leave it to me." Liu patted his chest. "But if there's a problem, you'll have to solve it." "Of course, I'll take care of both sides." Chu Li nodded. Liu smiled. What about the residents outside the public house? Can you take care of it? Chu smiled. I have Sister Zhao. Hee hee. You and Sister Zhao are progressing well. Liu smiled slyly. You're about to get her, right? It's not that easy. A woman's heart is like a needle at the bottom of the sea. You can't be careless. Don't spout nonsense. Of course not. Liu patted his chest. I'm very tight-lipped. I heard that Zhou Feiyang has isolated himself again. Be careful. Chu nodded. Zhou Feiyang was very talented. If he really put in the effort to cultivate, he would have no problem breaking through to the innate mastery level. Chu would not underestimate Zhou Feiyang. Although Liu guarded the East Garden, he was very well informed. He had a wide range of contacts. Every day, he would go out of the island to communicate with people. He had heard countless rumors, some true and some false, but they were all very interesting and enjoyable. As he ate, he happily explained the reason why Zhou Feiyang isolated himself. It was because he couldn't beat Zhao Ying and couldn't bring himself to lose face. Zhao Ying's swordsmanship was amazing. She was very impressive in the martial arts hall. Very few people could beat her in swordsmanship. She was getting more and more famous. She was another martial arts genius. Chapter 39. The night was hazy and the moonlight was like water. 6 small boats, covered with black tarps, quietly approached the Jade Guardian Island. A few burly men disembarked and quietly carried more than 50 sacks into Chu Li's courtyard. In the brightly lit courtyard, he stood in the middle of the courtyard and ordered them to put down the sacks. His voice was calm and low, as if he was afraid of startling others. In a moment, the burly men disappeared without a sound. The small boats left the Jade Guardian Island and disappeared into the night in the blink of an eye. Xueling stood beside Chu Li. Her sparkling eyes turned as she looked at the sacks. Although she did not know what was in the sacks, she knew it was confidential based on their mysterious way of doing things. She needed to keep her mouth shut. Chu Li pointed at the pile of sacks and said, "Open them all." Xue walked over and bent down to open the sacks. Her back formed a beautiful arc that could move people's hearts. Chu Li shifted his gaze and looked at the sacks. Some of them were filled with dark red soil, some with dead leaves and grass, some with black sand, and some that emitted a foul smell like feces. Xue endured the foul smell and opened the sacks without changing her expression. She looked at Chu Li after she was done. Chu Li looked at the sacks and showed a satisfied expression. Everything he needed was here. He then ordered Xueling to spread the contents of the sacks in the courtyard in a specific order. Finally, she took 2 buckets of water and poured on top of them. The 2 of them worked for the whole night. Chu Li gave instructions while Xue was busy. Her white gown was stained and her body emitted a faint stench. Xue's expression did not change. She did whatever Chu Li said and did not complain at all. Chu Li laughed to himself. This girl was really good at enduring. As soon as the morning sun appeared, Chu Li stopped meditating and got out of the house. He asked Xue to water the sacks again. Xue came out of the west wing and took 2 buckets of water. She scooped up some water and splashed it bit by bit. She watered the 6-meter square of soil thoroughly. After that, Chu Li asked her to water it again after 2 hours. The most important thing today was to water it every 2 hours. Xue gritted her teeth and nodded. After Chu Li gave his instructions, he continued to practice the sentient menace. Xue watched from the side. Every 2 hours, she would start watering the plants. Once she was done, she would stand aside and watch Chu Li train. She memorized the 36 movements very quickly. At noon, Xueling prepared a sumptuous lunch. Chu Li sat at the stone table in the gazebo. Xueling, come and join us. Master, I'm a servant. I can't sit next to you. Xueling said sternly. Chu Li looked up at her and smiled. It's just the 2 of us. Why are there so many rules? Rules cannot be abandoned, Xueling said. Chu Li burst into laughter. All right, it's up to you. He found out about Xueling's background. She was originally the daughter of a magistrate's family. Later on, the magistrate was assassinated by a martial arts master. Her mother and Xueling sought refuge with her uncle. Xueling was only 10 years old at that time. Her hatred towards martial arts masters and her thirst for martial arts were buried in her heart. The magistrate was a disciple of the House of High Dukes. That was why she was able to enter the House of High Dukes and become a maid on the island of Jade Guardian. She had been working hard on her cultivation until she was 20 years old. However, she was not a genius in martial arts. Her progress was slow. She still needed some time before she could challenge the ranking tower. She watched Chu Li cultivate and was curious about what martial arts he was cultivating. She wondered if she could cultivate it. Chu Li lowered his head to eat. He had a great appetite. Halfway through his meal, he suddenly said, "The martial arts that I'm cultivating are not suitable for you." Xueling's expression changed. Chu Li looked up at her and smiled. "This is a Buddhist heart technique. It's not suitable for women to cultivate. It's very dangerous. Without enough Buddhist cultivation, cultivating it is suicide. Don't mess around." "Master, do you have enough Buddhist cultivation?" "You don't know where I came from?" Chieftain say. "I grew up in a temple. I've been cultivating Buddhist cultivation. That's why I dared to cultivate this martial art." "You can't do it. Cultivating it will only bring harm." "You're cultivating the crescent cryptic, right?" "Yes." Xueling nodded lightly. Chu Li said, "The power of this heart technique is strong, but it's not easy to cultivate." "It's okay," Xueling said. Chu Li looked at her. "If you cultivate this, you'll suffer." The crescent cryptic was not an ordinary heart technique. It cultivated the purest inner energy. It was extremely powerful, but the cultivation progress was slow. It was estimated to be 1/3 of the normal heart technique and twice the power of the normal heart technique. The crescent cryptic was suitable for geniuses to cultivate. It was better for ordinary people to avoid it. Xueling's ambition was higher than the sky, but her aptitude was average. If she really wanted to cultivate it, she would suffer a lot unless she had external help. Xueling pursed her red lips and did not say a word. Chu Li smiled and did not say anything else. With her personality, she would not turn back until she hit a brick wall. He could only let her despair and give up. Xueling's culinary skills were better than Li Yu's. Her talent in cooking was much stronger than her talent in martial arts. It was not suitable for her to cultivate martial arts. However, he knew Xueling's obsession. She was close to becoming a demon. She desperately wanted to cultivate martial arts to protect her family. He did not want to pour cold water on her. It was better to let her hit a brick wall herself. "Master, you haven't challenged a ranking tower before, right?" "No." "Then, can you pass the 9th floor?" Chu Li chuckled. Xueling looked at him quietly. There was no trace of smile on her face. Chu Li smiled and said, "I don't want to challenge the ranking tower. I don't want to be a protector." "I see." Xueling nodded lightly and did not say anything else. Even without the omniscient mirror, Chu Li could see her disdain. He waved his hand and said, "All right, go eat. Don't forget to water the plants." "Yes." Xueling bowed and retreated out of the pagoda. She turned around and left. Chu Li looked at her voluptuous and alluring silhouette and smiled. She was really a troublesome person. After eating, he went to the library and read for 2 hours. Then, he came back and continued cultivating the sentient menace. He cultivated until night time and then returned to the East Garden. He was determined to read all the books in the library. Every day, he would take 2 hours to read. Since he could not leave the public house, he wanted to finish reading as soon as possible. For the next few days, he stayed on the Jade Guardian Island. He would either water the plants, dig the soil, or add a sack of things. The dark red soil gradually turned dark black. In the end, it was as black as ink. The original stench turned into a faint fragrance, like the fragrance of red sandalwood. Chapter 40. That evening, when Chu Li returned to the East Garden, he saw Zhao Ying in his courtyard, drinking tea at the stone table. She was dressed in a light green gown, looking very graceful. When Zhao Ying saw him, she smiled and stood up. "Brother, you're really busy." Chu Li smiled and sat opposite her, smelling her faint fragrance. "Welcome, sister. Did something happen over there?" "Nothing." Zhao Ying sat down again. I've been shopping for a while. I didn't realize that Chongming Town is so big. I haven't finished shopping yet. All the sisters are in a good mood. Don't worry. Chuli nodded. It's all on you, sister. I really can't take care of things here. What are you busy with? Well, it's better if you don't know. So secretive. Zhao Ying rolled her eyes at him and did not ask anymore. What about the pub? Almost there. Zhao Ying frowned. The progress is quite slow. I think there's a problem with their design. The place is too big. How can there be so many people there? Chuli smiled. The corner of the shop is not good. It's deserted. Zhao Ying was a little worried. Brother, why did you choose that place? It's so good on the street. I want peace and quiet. Chuli smiled. Don't worry, there will be business. Besides, I didn't open the pub to make money. If they lose money, they will feel guilty and blame themselves. If they really lose money, then we can change it to something else. It might be very profitable. Come, let's walk around the town. We're still going? Zhao Ying's beautiful face was bitter. To the floral house. Why are we going there? Zhao Ying was suddenly curious. There are a lot of good things on that street. Let's see if we can find them. The street where the floral house was located was mostly filled with antique shops, just like the antique street in the future. With good eyesight and luck, you can find something good. Zhao Ying was skeptical. The two left the public house and arrived at Chongming Town. Lanterns were hung everywhere in the city. Strings of red lanterns lit up the entire Chongming Town, making it look like it was daytime. It was even more beautiful than daytime. The streets were bustling with activity. The bargaining sounds of the adults and the laughter of the children mixed together. It was unusually noisy. Chu Li and Zhao Yinglai quickly turned from the main street into a quiet street and entered an antique shop. Chu Li was very knowledgeable and had the omniscient mirror. Finding antiques was as easy as taking something out of his pocket. Very quickly, he picked up two leftovers. He bought one as a fake, wiped it again and again, then sold it as a genuine antique to the other shop. After visiting 5 shops, Chu Li had earned 100 taels of silver, which made Zhao Ying speechless. As the two of them walked on the street, Zhao Ying shook the few banknotes in her hand and smiled like a flower. Senior Marshal brother, your money is too easy to earn. Chu Li laughed. Knowledge is money. He tried to restrain himself as much as possible. He did not want to attract too much attention and only earned a small amount of money. Otherwise, it would not be easy to earn money in the future. As the saying goes, small streams flow, and one cannot buy and sell everything in one go. I've finally seen it for myself. Zhao Ying sighed. She had never experienced it firsthand. She felt that it did not matter if she knew a little more or a little less. As long as her martial arts were good, she would be able to rely on her martial arts when it mattered. Seeing how Chu Li made money as easily as taking something out of his pocket, she lamented that she had underestimated her knowledge. She made up her mind to study hard when she went back. The two of them entered the floral pavilion. There were already 2 people looking down at the things they wanted. The shopkeeper was smiling as he accompanied them. Chu Li glanced at it. It was a very ordinary wooden basket filled with some strangely shaped tree roots. They were suitable for making bonsai, as they were all precious trees. These tree roots cost 10 taels of silver each. No matter how precious they were just dead tree roots. At most, they could be made into bonsai or carved into small objects. There was no hope of growing them. However, Chu Li knew the 2 people who were looking. They were Gu Lithong and Zhou Yuding. They were focused on picking and did not pay attention to the people who came in. Chu Li activated the omniscient mirror and glanced at the tree roots. He then searched the memory palace in his mind to find out the origin of these tree roots. His gaze fell on Gu Lithong's hand. There were a total of 3 tree roots. One was shaped like a green pine, strong and strong. Another was shaped like an old man with a long beard. The third one was dark and hard, as if it was cast from iron. It formed a beautiful bough, combining hardness and softness. It's beautiful, right? Chu Li pointed and asked Zhao Ying. Zhao Ying nodded in admiration. How about buying it? Chu Li asked. Brother Gu picked it up. Zhao Ying smiled. Chu Li smiled and coughed lightly. Gu Litong heard Chu Li's voice. He raised his head and said, "Brother Chu, what a coincidence. Brother Gu, did you get anything?" Gu Litong raised the tree root in his hand. "Just a little something." Chu Li smiled. "Let's make a deal. How about letting me have it? We can discuss the price." Gu Litong laughed. Zhou Yuding stared at Chu Li proudly. "Why should I?" He looked at Zhao Ying. "Why, Sister Zhao, did you get to know Chu Li?" Zhao Ying's face turned red. Chu Li's face darkened. "Brother Zhou, watch your words. Watch my ass, am I wrong?" Zhou Yuding laughed. "You stole Zhou Feiyang's woman. That's amazing." Chu Li frowned. "Since when did Sister Zhao become Zhou Feiyang's woman?" "Brother Chong, I won't be polite to people who create trouble." Hee, that's what I said. So what if you're not polite?" Zhou Yuding's eyes widened. "I wanted to say that you stole Zhou Feiyang's woman." Chu Li sighed and turned to look at Gu Litong. "Brother Gu, you should be careful not to get yourself involved when you're with this troublemaker." "Brother Zhou is right," Gu Litong said with a smile. Gu Litong smiled and said, "Brother Chu, you're really something. You managed to snatch Zhou Feiyang's woman away from me." Zhao Ying took a deep breath and yelled, "Shut up." Both of them were stunned. Chu Li looked at her in surprise. He did not expect the gentle and weak girl to lose her temper. He thought it was interesting. Zhao Ying's face flushed red and her eyes widened. She pointed a slender finger at Zhou Yuding and berated him rudely. "You're a man, but you only know how to gossip all day long. Even I feel ashamed for Minister Zhou." Zhou Yuding's eyes widened. Zhao Ying scoffed. "Brother Zhou, Brother Chu Li, and I are classmates. We practice martial arts together and go shopping together. How did I become their woman? You're even closer to Brother Gu." "Sister Zhao Ying," Gu Litong shouted. Chu Li waved his hand. "All right, let's stop talking." He pointed at the 3 wooden roots in Gu Litong's hand. "Shopkeeper, has he paid for them?" "Not yet," the shopkeeper said with a smile. He recognized Chu Li and groaned in his heart. "Another one from the house of High Duke. All right, this one costs 100 taels. I'll buy it." Chu Li pointed at the wooden root that was as strong as a pine tree. The shopkeeper quickly said, "Thank you, master." Chu Li looked at Gu Litong. "Brother Gu, do you want to buy it?" Gu Litong glared at the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper closed fist, saluted apologetically, and smiled. "Master, I can't help it. It's a small business, a small business." Gu Litong sneered. 200 taels. Then it belongs to Brother Gu." Chu Li said immediately. He pointed at the wooden root that looked like an old man. "This one costs 100 taels. 200 taels." Gu Litong sneered. "Brother Gu is generous." "All right then, it belongs to Brother Gu." Chu Li smiled. He was decisive. Then he pointed at the 3rd stalk and smiled. 500 taels. Gu Litong gritted his teeth and glared at him. He understood Chu Li's intention. He was using money to disgust him and help Zhao Ying vent her anger. He sneered and threw the root that looked like an iron branch at Chu Li. "It belongs to you." Chu Li reached out and caught it. He frowned at him. Gu Litong smiled proudly. "It feels good to cheat people. Senior brother." Zhao Ying tugged at his sleeve. Her jade-like face was flushed with anger. Chu Li shook his head. He looked at the tree root in his hand and shook his head again. Zhou Yuding laughed out loud. Chu Li took a step forward. Zhou Yuding did not show any fear and looked at him disdainfully. Chu Li lowered his voice. "Brother Zhou, what if I tell Elder Zhou that you have a house in the southeast of the town and that you keep a woman? What'll he do?" Zhou Yuding's face changed and his smile froze. Chu Li shook his head. "Look at you, Brother Zhou. What if I tell Elder Zhou that you have a house in the northeast of the town and that you keep a woman? What'll he do?" "How dare you?" Zhou Yuding stared at him with a gloomy face. Chu Li chuckled and shook his head. "Someone like you dares to spread rumors and create trouble? If there are any bad rumors about Sister Zhao, you know the consequences. Chu Li, you're despicable." Zhou Yuding scoffed. Chu Li no longer looked at him. He smiled and extended his hand to Zhao Ying. "Sister Zhao, let's go." Zhao Ying glared at Zhou Yuding and walked out of the floral pavilion. Hey, that you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.